We are scalable. We are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology. We're scalable beyond any known limits right now. We are self-replicating technology. We are self-regulating technology. We're self-diagnosing technology. We're self-healing technology. We are self-actualizing technology. Scientists are struggling in the lab to replicate in artificial life what you and I do in our biology. And we're so good at it, we don't even give it a second thought. We don't even think about it. So I'm calling this out now, hopefully so you can have a deeper appreciation for this technology that we have in our bodies. This is why our humanness and our body is the key to our... Gregg Braden here. I am coming to you today from this beautiful studio, Sage Studios, Charleston, South Carolina. I'm going to invite you to do this. I want this to be really safe and really comfortable. In your mind, I'm going to invite you to put a little mental file folder in your mind called possibilities. And everything we do in here today, just put it in that file folder called possibilities. And the reason is because you already have a belief system. And that belief system has served you. It got you here today. You have to say it has served you. But here's the thing. The world changed. Nobody told us. And the world has changed in ways that we've never seen in recorded human history. And there are events unfolding in our lives, in our world, that we've not been prepared to adapt to and to accept into our lives. Some of them are more obvious than others. Some of them will become more obvious over these next 5 years, between now and the year 2030, and I'll talk about that. The belief system that got you to where you are today, it has served you. And I don't want to do anything to, in any way, dishonor that belief system. But I'm going to say this to you. The moment something happens in the world or the moment something happens in your life, and you look to that belief system and it fails you, please don't struggle. Don't struggle and try to make it fit. Don't try to put a square peg into a round hole. Bless that belief system, let it go, come to the file folder called possibilities. I think you're going to be amazed at how well the information that we share today serves you in the world that is emerging, not the world of the past, but the world that stands in front of us right now. So for me, that helps to make it a very safe and fun way. We're going to explore new discoveries, new science. I have some experiential processes I'm going to lead you through. And just to be responsible, I want to say this. If anyone is listening to this webinar who is driving or operating heavy machinery, please do not close your eyes and do the meditations, okay? Don't try to do any of these meditations unless you're in a place that is safe and allows you to do just those things, okay? So with that, I'm going to launch right into our program. My goal, and I do have a goal, what I know is that every one of you, if you're with me today, every one of you is standing in front of a virtual doorway in your life. You're standing perched on the precipice of a door that is opening in front of you, a door that is the opportunity to become something very different in your life. The universe is at your doorstep, tapping you on the shoulder, or maybe tapping you on the feet, asking you to find a part of yourself, to embrace the changes in your life, the changes in your body, the changes in your nations, the changes in your families and your friends in ways that you've never been asked to do. I'm with you. We're all in this together. So we are all perched on the precipice of this doorway. It's an invitation, and you don't have to accept the invitation. It is an invitation to become the best version of yourself. So my goal is to awaken the confidence in you, to accept that invitation. Because I think we all know there is a new world. A new world is emerging. Would you agree with that? You see a new world emerging out there? You know, I'm watching you right now. But here's the thing. There is a new world, but the world out there is a mirror. It can only reflect what we have come to accept about ourselves. I want you to think about that. Technology, for example. We are living in a technological age. The tech is never right, wrong, good or bad. It's how it's applied, the thinking with how it's applied. Does the technology serve to make us free and healthy and vital? Or does the technology work to control us and to limit our abilities and our capabilities in life? So it's just tech, but the thinking is what's important. There's a new world emerging out there, but it's a reflection of the world in here, the world within. So before we begin, this is where I'm going to need your permission. Are you okay if I challenge your current belief system? Are you okay with that? If I say something that is counter to the narrative that you're being asked to accept in your life and your world, are you okay with that? I'm just asking you. Yes? All right. I'm assuming that this is a very informed audience. I don't have to begin at ground zero. You all have done a lot of reading, and many of you have been with me in the past. Are you okay if I go really deep and go really fast? You all right if we do that? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up, so that means we can continue. See, if the thumbs were down, it'd be a different program. But I'm seeing lots of thumbs up. Thank you for that. Thank you for your trust. Now, the biggest question, are you absolutely sure? Are you absolutely sure that you're okay with those things? Okay, because we're going to come back to this in a little while, and I'm going to say, you told me that I could do this. All right. I want to begin simply by saying, you and I, we're in this together. We are absolutely not what we have been told in the past. We're not what we have been told by science and society and culture and friends and family, even well-meaning, typically, because we're only beginning to understand what it means to be human. And I'm going to say this to you right now. You are probably more than you have even dared to allow yourself to imagine yourself to be. There's something inside of us that wants to hold back. There's something inside of us that says we're not worthy of the greatness that is available to us. Well, this book, Pure Human, I wrote this very specifically for this time in history. This book is a celebration. It is a celebration of our humanness in a time when our humanness is being denigrated publicly. In our public schools, young people are being taught that we humans are a flawed species, F-L-A-W-E-D, flawed, that we are flawed by our very existence. Let me just give you an example. Some of the flaws that they talk about is human emotion. They believe that human emotion, it's being taught that emotion is a flaw because it clouds our ability to think logically and to make logical decisions. That's just one of the flaws. Well, empathy, sympathy, compassion are also being seen in some circles as a human flaw. I don't know about you, those are some of the things that I cherish most about our species. There's a movement right now to change this world, and you're seeing the consequences of that movement in your everyday life. You're seeing it in politics, you're seeing it in economics, you're seeing it in finance, you're seeing it in science, society, technology, but nobody's really putting it together for you. I want to have a little conversation here in this first hour, and I'm going to tell you right now, I've lost friends having this conversation because it is covering some topics that are simply not comfortable. But if you don't cover these topics, the changes in the world don't make sense. People come to me all the time and they say, Greg, what in the world is going on, man? Isn't it interesting that all these changes in the world are happening simultaneously? That they're all happening spontaneously in the world, whether we're talking about social change or climate change or political change or economic change or, all the things that we're seeing. Here's what you're not being told. It's not random. It's not spontaneous. There's a process. There's a structure. You and I are in the process right now, but nobody tells us. And the only way out of the process is to go through the process. And my goal is to help us to navigate so that we come through this process in a healthy way that's good for us, good for our families, good for our friends, to come in with a soft landing on the other side of this process. In the next 5 years, between now and 2030, you are going to be asked You're going to be indoctrinated. You're going to be coerced. You may be mandated in some cases to make decisions, not just about your world, but about your body. That's what makes this so very different. You're going to see this in the program today. For the first time in human history, we have the ability not only to change the world around us. We've always had that ability. You know, we began burning trees and coal and now fossil fuels for energy. That changes the world around us. And we've done some good things, planted lots of trees and done things to actually care for the environment. That's all in the world around us. For the first time in 5,000 years of recorded human history, we have the ability not just to change the world around us, but to change the world within us. And we're being asked to do just that in the next 5 years. The reimagining of the world is only possible when we change our biology. My goal today and my goal in this book is to give you reasons to think differently about your body, to think differently about yourself, to, at the very least, I'm hoping that you'd leave this program today with a deeper appreciation for what it means to be human. And I'm going to take it even a step further. I'm hoping that we all walk away with a deeper sense of pride, because I am proud to be a human. And the experts are telling us, the best minds of our time are telling us, on the trajectory that we are on right now, if we do not change our thinking and the technology in the world, that we very probably are the last generation of pure humans that this world will ever know. That's where the title of the book comes from. They say by the year 2030, when you talk to someone at the market, and you talk to someone on the street, you're going to be talking to a hybrid of biology and some form of technology. Maybe for some people more, maybe for some people less. Whether we're talking about chemicals in the blood, computer chips in the brain, RFID chips under the skin, whatever it is, we'll be talking to some hybrid. And here's the thing. Once we embark on that path and we begin to give our humanness away, we cannot go back. It's not like a little dial where you can say, hey, let's try this for a year. If it doesn't work, we'll go back to the way we used to be. You can't do that, and here's the reason. The human body is so sophisticated that when we embrace a new technology into our bodies, our DNA, our cells, our neurons, they morph and they adapt to that new technology. They become different. There's nothing to go back to because your body has now adapted to the new technology that you're being invited to place into your body. I'm going to give you the reasons why this, in my opinion, is not it's not a healthy thing per se, in mass for everyone. But I'm also going to show you the new science, the new discoveries that show you, in many cases, our natural biology meets and it even exceeds the capabilities of the technology. And that's a mind blower. Young people are in my programs all the time. They've been taught to worship computer chips and to worship AI. AI is fast. Computer chips are fast. They're efficient, and no doubt. And I like technology outside my body. When you begin to see what the studies are showing about human neurons, human biology, human systems, what you begin to see is we not only meet, we exceed many of those potentials because we are literally a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated technology in ourselves, but we're a soft technology, not a hard technology, not like a computer chip. We're soft technology. Cell membranes, neurons, DNA. So this is where we're going to go with this. The better you know yourself, the less you're going to fear your own power. The easier it is to embrace that power in your life. So there's a context. And so often when we have a spiritually oriented program, it's isolated. So you learn about the spirituality, but doesn't connect to the world out there. So you learn all these cool things, meditations and affirmations and all that. And then you go out into the world and you go, whoa, what does what I learned have to do with the world out there? I'm going to share with you a context. Now, I don't want to dwell on it, but I want you to know there is a context, there is a structure. Let's talk about this. I think you all know we're living a time of extremes. social extremes, political extremes, economic extremes, refugee extremes in the world, climate extremes, religious extremes, emotional extremes. We're living this world of extremes, and every one of them is important. And I want to be clear about that. I'm not saying they aren't important, but I am saying this. In many cases, we have allowed the extremes of the world around us and the media that trumps up these extremes. We've allowed those extremes to become diversions in our lives. Diversions from something much, much deeper that is happening. And it's playing out in your life, in your world, my life, and my world. And once we recognize what this is, then the pieces begin to fall into place. And it's much easier to make sense out of the chaos in the world. And that's where I'm going to go with this. Something is missing in our story. So I'm going to acknowledge, again, right now, a lot of people don't want to talk about what I'm about to share with you here. I think our lives are incomplete if we do not have this conversation. It's described in the clues from our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions. They're very old, but they're not obsolete. Our ancestors began telling us about a process in this world. Modern science has discounted the process, but it's very real, and that's what I want to talk to you about right now. This context, you and I are part of an ancient struggle, all right? It's a struggle in the world that began long, long ago before we even appeared. It began in the spiritual realm, if we are to believe our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions. It's a struggle that began in the spiritual realm long ago, but it continues as the chaos on earth today. It's a struggle between what many people call light and dark, okay, the forces of light and dark. We interpret those forces as a struggle between good and evil. Now, I want to tell you, when we talk about good and evil, I was born and raised in a very conservative community in the middle of this big, beautiful United States that we live in. Some of us live in northern Missouri, if there's anyone from Missouri here. We used to talk about good and evil, and it was kind of a joke. You know, we'd talk about a little red devil that would be on one shoulder with a pitchfork and a pointy tail, and an angel on the other side, and they were always, you know, talking back and forth, do this, don't do this. That was the extent of the conversation of good and evil when I was a kid, when I was growing up. Well, the goal of this struggle between good and evil is the reason I wrote this book. The goal of the struggle, and I want you to really get this, the goal of the struggle between good and evil is to deny us our highest form of power as humans. And we call that power divinity. Now, I'm going to acknowledge right now, I know divinity means different things to different people. And there's some baggage attached to the word. There's some preconceived ideas, and I'm acknowledging that. Many people link divinity with religion because there are schools of divinity that make those connections. But I'm going to show you a definition, and this may surprise you. It's a contemporary definition of divinity. Look at this. Divinity is defined as the powers or the forces that transcend perceived human limits, and that's it. Now think about what this is saying. I want you to really think about this. Powers or forces that transcend, that means become more than perceived human limits. You and I are probably living limits that are not even real. You and I are living limits that we've been indoctrinated to accept when it comes to our healing and our bodies and our potential, our cognitive abilities, telepathy, ESP, empathy, all of those kinds of things. We're living limits that we have inherited from other people. Divinity is our ability to embrace those limits and enjoy them in our lives. That's divinity, all right? The struggle between good and evil is a struggle to deny us our divinity. Let me show you why. Let me show you why this is. And I talk about this in the book, but not to the detail that I'm sharing with you today. That's why I'm doing it here today. Because all of this is the context for everything we're seeing happening in our lives. This struggle between good and evil. it has defined all of human history. All of human history has happened within the umbrella, within the context. I think many of you know I'm a scientist. I'm a scientist. I was trained as a systems thinker. So a systems thinker looks at the big picture to see where everything fits, and then goes into the details to see where those details fit in the big picture. When I look at the world out my window right now, and as I travel this world, what I see makes no sense because I was never given the context. I had to study, do the research, travel, go to the ancient temples, to the ancient texts, to understand what I'm saying to you right now. It is this ancient struggle that is the context. It's the glue that's holding everything together. It's defined all of human history. It's defining our world right now. Right now, everything you're seeing, whether you're talking about Russia and Ukraine, or you're talking about what's happening in the Middle East, or you're talking about the social changes that are tearing our families apart, tearing our communities apart. They're all expressions of good and evil. Now, sometimes that evil is called kinetic. You're seeing it on your screen. Kinetic evil is where people are boots on the ground, where there's conflict, they're fighting one another. But there's a lot of evil that is not kinetic. There are many expressions of evil. And once you begin to recognize them, then you are empowered to navigate in a healthy way and make good choices. Sometimes that evil is psychological. And we're seeing this a lot in our lives today. When you are engaged in social programs or social media that creates fear or feelings of guilt, or makes one another suspicious of other people in our family, our friends and neighbors, that's what divides our communities. That's what divides our society. That is an expression of evil. Breaking the social bonds that hold us together as community is an expression of evil. It's playing out in society in the conversations of culture and gender and family. Now, I want to be really clear about this. All of these are important. We need to talk about gender. We need to talk about culture. We need to talk about family. But look at what's happened. What's happening is powers that be, and we'll talk about those powers that be in a few minutes, they are using these issues that could be discussed in kindness to bring us together into a tightly knit community. But they're using these issues as weapons. They're weaponized to divide us. And you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing, man. It's happening at the family dinner table. It's happening between coworkers and friends. It is happening between husbands and wives, whether it's political, economic, whatever it is. You know what I'm talking about here. These are expressions of evil that divide us. It's playing out in the algorithms on social media. All the social media that's out there that limits our ability to communicate with one another and creates ridicule and shame and hate. It's not our natural state. It's not our natural state. We are nature. In nature, we are all about cooperation and love and empathy and sympathy. But these algorithms are driving us to be something that we were never meant to be. It's playing out in entertainment as the normalization of evil. Now, for copyright purposes, I can't put this on the screen. But if you want an example, just go to YouTube, check out the Grammy presentations 2023, look at the musical performance by Sam Smith, and you'll see a perfect example of what I mean. The normalization, the acceptance of expressions of evil in our everyday lives. Sometimes the evil is technological, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. All those other things are important. The book is about our humanness, and the technology is being used to replace our humanness. And that's what I want to talk to you about. Sometimes the evil is technology. There is a movement right now to replace our biology with technology. And they're especially targeting young kids, AI, computer chips in the brain, chemicals in the blood, RFID chips under the skin, nanosensors moving throughout the body, transmitting information to large databases run by AI. All of this is happening right now. This isn't, a future sci-fi scenario. It's happening now. because the technology is available. It's how it's implemented. It's the purpose of the technology. So I want this to be as current as possible. Just last week was the annual meeting, and many of you are familiar with the WEF, World Economic Forum, founded in 1971, where people, very wealthy people, CEOs of corporations, leaders of nations, tech companies, they gather together in Davos, Switzerland, as they have every right to do. They have conversations about what they would like to see in the world, as they have every right to do, and they've been doing this since 1971, no big deal. Here's what changed. They were not getting any traction with those ideas, and in 2019, they signed a formal agreement with the United Nations and a program called the Sustainable Development Goals, using the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, to implement the ideas, because they felt like there was synergy there. So now what we're seeing is the UN Sustainable Development Goals for the year 2030 have become the vehicle to share and implement the ideas of the WEF. Well, what are those ideas? They reiterated it again this year. By the year 2030, the goal from the founder, Klaus Schwab, is to fuse our physical world, our digital world, and here's the kicker, our biological world together, to fuse them together into a massive database run by artificial intelligence that they feel is going to make the world a better place. All right? This is current. It's not a million years down the road. And what makes it concerning is that there are legal reasons for the nations of the world, the EU and the United States and other countries, to follow these principles if they're mandated through the UN. How are they going to do this? One of the contributors, he plays many roles, Yuval Harari, some of you know exactly who he is. He's a contributor he's a historian, he's a thinker, he's a philosopher, he's an author, and he is a contributor at the World Economic Forum, is now saying that humans specifically are hackable. We are hackable, he says, hackable animals. We have hackable biology. And it's because we are hackable that technology is able to remake the way that our bodies function in our relationship to the world. This is called transhumanism. Trans means beyond human, so beyond human. I was at a conference recently having this conversation, and a number of the scientists were in there, and they said, well, Greg, isn't this the next step in our evolution to merge humankind, our biology, with technology, to merge biology with silicon, to embody those technologies into our bodies? Isn't that the next step in our evolution? And I said, no, absolutely not. I said, it is a form of evolution. It's not natural. It's a forced evolution. And here's the thing. No one tells us what the cost. What is the cost of giving our bodies away to technology? They're not talking about this. The cost is that we lose our very humanness. And the rest of this program, I'm going to show you what that means. But for right now, what I'll say is this. When you begin to relinquish your natural abilities, your natural immune system, your natural cognitive abilities, your ability, your sensory abilities, when you begin to trade them for technology, here's what happens. Your natural abilities feel that they're no longer needed in your body, and they begin to atrophy. And they atrophy to the point, or pretty soon, you don't have them anymore. They no longer function. In the next generation, those abilities become a vestige of something that we used to do that we don't do anymore. The human body works on a principle called use it or lose it. And you've all heard that before. Use it or lose it. So if we don't use our cognitive abilities, I'm going to give you some examples as we go through the program. If we don't use our immune systems, if we don't use our reproductive systems in the way they were designed, our body begins to atrophy those systems. So this is what we're not told, is the cost. Now, I'm going to share something, and I'm not going to dwell on this for the whole day. I want you to have this. This is a context for everything that we're going to do, and then we're going to let it go, and we're going to jump into the new discoveries applying them in our lives, the meditations, all that. But this context is very important, because if you don't have what we're talking about, it's easy to be coerced or indoctrinated into accepting these technologies because they make them look really attractive. The marketing says that you'll be safer if you take these technologies into your body. Your life will be easier. You will be healthier. This is what you're being told through the very slick, very sexy marketing. And so I want you to be informed so that you can make healthy choices. One of the most important things maybe that I'll be able to share with you today is this. We all know there's evil in the world, and it's kind of a nebulous concept. I want to give you a benchmark. I want to give you something rock solid so you can see when it shows up in your life. And we now have everything we need to do just that. The benchmark for evil, okay, if divinity is the ability to transcend perceived limitations, anything that denies your divinity is an expression of evil. Anything that takes away from you the ability to imagine, to innovate, to create, to have empathy, sympathy, compassion, the ability to heal your own body, the ability to love without fear, the ability to forgive without guilt. These are all expressions of divinity. Anything that denies your divinity is an expression of evil. And I want you to know that, because I'm in this with you. We're all going to be coerced or indoctrinated into accepting into our lives and our bodies technologies. Are they good for us or are they not? How do you know? Here's a benchmark right here. Does it support my divinity or does it deny my divinity? I'm not suggesting what to do. I'm giving you the tool so that you can make your own decisions for you and in your family, all right? The struggle that I'm talking about, beyond being technological and psychological and kinetic, it is a deeply spiritual struggle. Of course it is, because we're talking about good and evil. But let me show you what it means. The question, we're going to get through this little window of time, these next few years, we're all going to get through it together, and maybe we'll come back here and we'll have a reunion. We'll have a pure human reunion program in 2031, and we'll say, okay, how did it go? But here's the question. We're going to get through it. I'm going to look you right in the eye when I say this. What do we become in the presence of what we're asked to do in our lives? What do we become in the presence of the changes? Do we allow the changes in the world around us to make us into something we would never choose to be in a million years? Now I'm going to be personal. Do you allow the changes to make you into something that you would never choose in a million years? Do you allow the consequences of a presidential election to drive you to the most primal instincts of fear or hate or revenge, for example? And if you do, I'm not judging as right, wrong, good, or bad. It's something to be aware of, because you've empowered the conditions to drive you into something that you're not. So I want you to be aware of that. What do we become in the presence of what we're shown? You know, there's sometimes we all have what's called a spiritual warrior. And there's sometimes when that spiritual warrior has to claim the values that we cherish or, the ideas. The question is, do we respond from love or from fear? All right? Someone comes to you, and maybe they attack you personally, they attack your family, they say something to you on social media, they say something to your kids, and you lash out, as a spiritual warrior does. Here's the question. This is where spiritual mastery comes in. Do you respond from your love of those who are behind you, or do you respond from your fear of what happens if you don't, or your hate of those that stand in front of you? That's the spiritual question. What does our soul become in the presence of what the world is showing us? We get to choose that. And we're going to go through the tools. We're going to go through some tools today to help you navigate these things in a healthy way. Some of this is in the book. A lot of it's not in the book. We're going into more detail now than I could possibly do in the book. Couldn't really lead you through meditations in the book. So again, this isn't a carbon copy, but some of these ideas are beyond what I was able to do in that book. Do we respond to the world from our love of what we know is possible or our fear of what happens if we don't? That knowing informs us. That's where we find our strength. That's an expression of human divinity, of choosing to respond from love rather than fear. The extremes all over the world that have become distractions. They are distractions from an even deeper battle. That battle, even deeper, it's a struggle. That battle beyond money. The powers that be don't need any more money. They make the money. They don't need more money. That's not why we're fighting wars, and that's not why we're hurting our brothers and sisters. Borders, it's not over borders. That is the distraction. It's not even over power. They already have the power. It's over something much deeper. And if you're not with me right now, I want you to focus right now, because this is where you come in. The deeper battle, it's all about you. It's the battle for our very humanness. I'll just tell you why. Because it's through our humanness that we access our divinity. Through our humanness. You are the prize. I am the prize. We are the prize for these distractions that are going on. I know that's very different from what many of us have been taught. We've been taught that we're insignificant, that we are just kind of the inconsequential byproducts of a world, and there's something much deeper. That's not true. You read those ancient texts that were left out of the biblical canon. You read the Gnostic text. You read 43 books that were not included in the canon that were discovered 1945. You read the complete messages in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you read the Vedic texts, and you read all these ancient texts. They all tell us the same thing. You and I, we are the prize. And now let me tell you why we're the prize. Because probably no one's ever said this to you. And if that's true, I'm honored to be the first to say this to you. I want you to have the reasons to think of yourselves differently. I want you to have the reason to know how powerful, how significant you are, and why your pure humanness holds the power and the value that it does. Because there's something inside of us, all of us, there's something inside of us that is so powerful, and it is so beautiful, and it is so ancient, and it is so precious, that civilizations have actually risen and fallen to distract us from this part of ourselves. That nations have gone to war with other nations to keep us distracted and spun up in the diversions. Armies have destroyed armies. Banks have been collapsed. Diseases have been unleashed. Societies have been destroyed. Climate has been engineered, and it's being engineered right now. Lies have been told and lies have been accepted. All of this has happened to keep us distracted from a power of our divinity. Your body is the key to that divinity. Here's why divinity is so powerful. Why is it so important? Divinity frees us from fear. Divinity frees us from hate. Now, right there, I could stop right there. Fear and hate are powerful commodities in a world where a handful of people, a very few, want to be able to control many. Fear and hate, very, very powerful commodities. But it doesn't stop there, because divinity frees us from the programming. My dear friend, my spiritual brother, Bruce Lipton, we just celebrated 30 years of knowing and working together, Bruce Lipton and I. And he talks about these programs that are instilled within us when we are young, between the ages of birth and 7. The programs that teach us about our value and our worth in the world. Divinity frees us from the false programs that make us feel small and powerless and vulnerable. Divinity is what frees us to love fully. I know every one of you has loved in the past, and maybe you are able to love right now. But I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you have ever loved and trusted enough to surrender your love so deeply without holding anything back, that love with another person, so that together you can find a greater love than either of you can find individually? How many have been able to do that? Or is there always a part of you that holds a little bit back, just in case it doesn't work out? The fear that says, I can't give myself away completely to a greater possibility. Divinity frees us to love fully, fearlessly, without conditions. Divinity frees us to forgive. Many of us forgive, but how many people forgive and then they look around to see who saw them forgive with the expectation that they're acknowledged for that forgiveness? To forgive without expectation. Divinity is the source. Your divinity is the source of your power in this world. Now, maybe in another world it works differently, but in this world, your divinity is the source of your power. That's why there's an ancient struggle to deny you your divinity, because those powers that be will stop at nothing to deny your divinity. All the distractions that are important, and we need to deal with them. But at a high level, they're distractions to keep you spun up, to keep your focus away from your own divinity. Your divinity, it's more than your thoughts. It's more than your conscious mind. Now, I know a lot of you study the subconscious. It's important, and I'm not denying that, but I want to say is your divinity is more than your subconscious mind. Your divinity is part of what is called your superconscious self. Superconscious. And what does that mean? Well, this is very interesting because it's a part of you that is ancient. It is timeless. It's the part of you that's direct knowing. When somebody asks you a question, or if you've got kids and you know without doubt when something has happened with one of your kids, even if they're not in the same room with you. You know when they're in trouble. You know when they're hurt. You know when they're hungry. How does that happen? That is part of your direct knowing. Deep intuition, empathy, sympathy, as we said, creativity, imagination, innovation. It's where your love begins. The healing of your body is only possible through your acceptance of your own divinity. Remember the definition, the ability to transcend perceived limits. Your healing is only possible if you accept your healing. If you accept what your body already knows how to do, you have to accept that. These are all expressions of human divinity. Let me give you a couple of examples of everyday divinity. My wife is, Martha, is a voting member of the Grammys, and a few years ago, she had the opportunity to attend the Grammys when they were in New York. It was one of the few times that's happened. We just finished the Grammys a couple of nights ago, and she wasn't there and I wasn't there. But I did accept her invitation. She says, Greg, would you like to go? And I said, well, sure. So I had the opportunity to attend the Grammys the year they were in New York. And I made the most of that invitation. Every musician, every singer, every songwriter that I met, somewhere during the conversation, I would ask them a question. I would say, wow, that amazing song, that amazing piece of music, those amazing lyrics. I'd say, where did they come from? Now, you all already know the answer to what I'm going to say. I'd say, where did they come from? And every single one of those musicians, without exception, gave me exactly the same answer. Every one of them said, the music and the words did not come from me. Where'd it come? You guys tell me. It came through me. It came through me. I had to get out of the way to allow that music or those words to flow through me. That is an expression of human divinity. You hear the same thing with artists and sculptors and painters. When they sit down at a blank canvas, or a sculptor sits in front of a piece of stone, it's just a piece of stone. And they're going to free whatever it is in that stone that wants to be expressed. It comes through them, the ability to see what that is. Believe it or not, same thing happens with scientists, engineers, mathematicians. You know, I worked in the corporations from the late 70s to the mid-90s with scientists and engineers. And I saw this again and again. It wasn't enough to solve the equation. The mathematicians wanted an elegant solution, a beautiful solution. Or the computer programmers, it wasn't enough to write the code. They wanted beautiful code. These are expressions of that divinity. They stepped out of the way and allowed that to come through them. Same thing happens with writers. When I write a book, when I wrote Pure Human, I had to get out of the way and let that come through. Examples of everyday divinity when you are with yourself. Maybe you're doing yoga in nature or walking in nature, and you have that deep connection. That is an expression of human divinity. The connection, the love, that a parent feels, especially a mother with a child, that opens the door to that deep divinity. These are all expressions of everyday divinity. So I'm saying this because I want you to know divinity is your everyday life. It's not peripheral. It's not something out there that just happens, at a certain time of night when the kids are fed and the dishes are done and lunches are packed and you go into a special room and you close the door and you light the candles and you burn the incense and roll out the yoga mat and put on Stephen Halpern's Higher Ground, track 1, and the bowls and the bells and the gongs and the chimes. You take a deep breath and you begin your spiritual practice. You get the idea. It's not something that you do. Divinity is something you become. It is the core of our daily lives, and that's why it's so important to preserve it. Many of you, I know, are familiar with Krishnamurti, the philosopher. There's a picture of him as a young man. And he said something I think bears a lot of truth to what we're doing here. He said, as long as the mind clings to a belief, it is held in a prison. I think there's a lot of truth to that. As long as the mind clings to a belief, rigidly to a belief, no exceptions, rigidly to a belief, it's held in a prison. And the reason that's important, because as long as you and I cling to the diversions, as long as we allow the media and our friends and families to spin up those diversions and keep our spiritual energy and our heart and our emotion locked into those diversions, you and I are imprisoned in the fear that separates us. And I'm not saying don't be aware. I have to be aware of what's happening in the world, but you have to manage that awareness. You have to be able to know where to put it in your life so it doesn't dominate your life. And you have to know that whatever it is that you're being told about the world is probably only a fraction of what is actually happening in the world, because the information is being managed through algorithms that lead us to make choices that support very specific agendas. And that's no surprise. You all know that. There's a battle for our thoughts, a battle for our beliefs. So as long as we deny our own divinity, and again, I'm going to go back this again. What is the definition of divinity? It's the ability to transcend perceived limits. As long as we deny our ability to transcend perceived limits, we are imprisoned in the feeling that we're not worthy. We're not worthy of what? We're not worthy of love. We're not worthy of happiness. We're not worthy of our own healing. We're not worthy of life itself. I like to say things to the positive, so let's turn this around. As we accept our divinity, as not when, because it's happening, as we accept our divinity, then we ignite our love, we ignite our happiness, we ignite our own healing, we ignite our own sense of worth, we ignite our own passion for life. It's all an expression of human divinity. Now, one more thing before we'll take our comfort break here in just a few minutes. One last concept before we take that break. We talk about the struggle between good and evil. There's an old idea that we have been indoctrinated to believe. We talk about the struggle that it's a struggle of conflict, force against force, light against dark. You know what I'm talking about here, right? We've all been taught to accept that. The struggle between good and evil. What I want to say is this isn't something that we want to win. You don't want to win the struggle between good and evil, because that implies the old idea of conflict that keeps us stuck in the struggle. Are you with me on this? What we want is to triumph. Triumph is different than winning. We want to triumph in this battle. How do we triumph? By living the best version of ourselves. You triumph over evil. Think about this. It makes perfect sense. If the goal of the struggle between good and evil is to deny you your divinity, then you triumph by living your divinity. You triumph by loving fearlessly, by forgiving without expectation, by freely imagining and creating and communicating with other people and sharing those ideas without having them edited and censored. You experience these things. You triumph through empathy, empathizing with our brothers and sisters who are having a hard time, sympathizing, compassion, healing. When you accept your own healing, that is you triumphing over the force of evil. Very different than winning. And I hope this makes sense. We'll do a Q&A in the next session, and you can ask me about that if it doesn't. It's a very different way of thinking, and I know that. We triumph over evil by living the best version of ourselves, by living our divinity. So I'm going to ask you, just for your own consideration, think about your life. Think about everything that's happening in your life, conversations that you're having with friends and family. We've got a lot of changes that are happening in the world. You know, in 2024, just a few months ago, was the first time in recorded human history that 40 nations on Earth, all in the same year, had elections for the highest position of leadership in the land. Whether they were princes or kings or presidents or prime ministers, whatever they were called. 40 nations the same year, that's never happened. And the people of those nations voted for some kind of change very different from what they have had in the past. And those changes, it's a different world. It's a different way of living for many of us. So I'm going to invite you to ask yourself, in your life challenges, maybe you've got a health challenge now. Maybe you've got friendship challenges. Many of you are reconsidering where you place your spiritual energy for work every day. What is it that you give your energy to every day? You're thinking about new jobs. Many of you, I hear from you all over the world, you're thinking about where you live and if it's time to maybe look at other places to live. Everyone's looking for community. Everyone's looking for what they call their tribe, whether it's a physical tribe or a virtual tribe. People are looking for others to collaborate with and to share ideas. So I'm going to invite you in the challenges, whatever challenges are up for you in your life right now. Are you attempting to win in that challenge, which implies struggle, and one force prevailing over another, or are you attempting to triumph? Triumph means that you live the best version, you make your choices, you make your way of life. You're not trying to change what the world is showing you, you're choosing to move forward to live the best version of yourself. You know, I think maybe one of the best ways to say this, Buckminster Fuller, I never met Buckminster Fuller. I had friends of mine that were good friends with him, and I wish I had him. He died in the 80s. If you don't know, he is the architect of the geodesic dome, what they call the buckyballs. And he said once, and I think there's a lot of truth in this, he said, you'll never change the world by fighting against the things that you don't like. He said, if you want change in the world, find a new way that makes the old way obsolete. People will follow the new way, and the old way falls away. That is an example of triumph. You don't fight necessarily, but you move in a direction that expresses your heart's desire, rather than struggling to change the circumstances that you feel have imprisoned you in the past. That's the difference between winning and triumphing. So in your life, do you attempt to win or do you attempt to triumph? And it's not a question that you answer with words. It's a question that you answer through your actions, the way that you respond to what the universe has brought to your doorsteps. I want you, just something to think about. I want you to think about this. When you take away the false programs that we have all been conditioned to accept, the fear and the lies, all that remains is what's true. When you take away those false programs, all that remains is your divinity. All right? I want you to be aware of this ancient struggle between good and evil. I'm not going to talk about it a lot for the rest of the day. It's the context, though, for everything that we're doing. It's why that book was written. All right? So, if the battle is for our humanness, because through our humanness we express our divinity, what is so special? What is it so special? Why wouldn't we want a computer chip in the brain? Why wouldn't we want chemicals in the blood? Young people come to me all the time. They say, Greg, what's wrong with AI in my body? What's wrong with that? If I can talk to a computer without a keyboard and without a wire because there's a chip in my brain talking to that computer, what's wrong with that? We come back, I'm going to answer that question. Your body is the key to your divinity. That's where we're going to go with this in our next session. Now, I want to thank you for the first session. I know it was fast. We covered a lot of ground. At a very high level, I wanted to share that context with you. And I think if you can keep that context in mind as you see the events of the world around you, it will help you to make sense of what we're seeing in the world right now. And now we're going to go into some tools that help us to navigate those changes in a really healthy way. Before we took our break, I made a statement. I said, your body is the key to your divinity in this world, because it's through our bodies that we have access to that part of ourselves that is timeless, it is ancient, it is all-knowing. If you don't have a body, it's very difficult to access your divinity. And I think that's going to be clear, because the movement to replace our body with synthetics means that we cannot access our divine nature. And I'm going to show you why that is right now. Your body is the key to your divinity. And a lot of people don't make that connection. They separate divinity, you know, something out there, and then the body is here. The body is the key. You know, our ancestors, in many traditions, call the human body a temple. And there's a reason. The last session of today, you're going to see that there is a sacred message actually encoded into the DNA of every cell of your body. You truly are a temple housing that message, and we'll see that later today. But I want to show you some science, and this is, if you've never seen what I'm about to share with you, it's kind of a mind blower, what you're going to see here. The scientific experiment that helps us to understand the link between our biology and our divinity, or our bodies and the part of us that is timeless and ageless. I'm going to give you some evidence of why this is true. So I'm going to begin. Some of you I know are younger and don't recall this, and some of you may be old enough to remember this. The very first commercial computer game that made it big all over the world, it was a game called Pong. It was released in 1972, November of 1972. Now, when we talk about Pong today, it looks very primitive. But when it happened, computers were new in our desktop. Prior to 1972, most computers were in big rooms, big computers, big air-conditioned rooms. Nobody had them in their homes. I know it's hard to even think about that now. 1972, there was a game called Pong that was released. Okay, and I know you're excited. Let me show you what Pong looked like, and you're going to have to really hold yourself back because it's so exciting. That's Pong. It was essentially a digital tennis game, is what it was. Now, I remember I was working in the corporations after school when this happened. And I remember that there were high-paid engineers that would come back from lunch, and they would load this game on their computers, and they would just they'd get lost in I'm going to play it again. They get lost in playing this game with one another. And, you know, today it looks so primitive compared to what we do. But there's a reason I'm sharing this with you. So the first computer game, Pong, 1972, and it was a game that swept the world. All right, so it wasn't just in one country or anything like that. So here's the experiment. The experiment in 2022, scientists wired some human neurons to a computer chip. So let me just explain what's happening here. You know, neurons have what look like little tentacles on the cell. They're called dendrites. And they created a special computer chip with an opening called a port, and they could connect the dendrites on the neuron into that port. So now you have a biology silicon interface, all right? And then they loaded that chip into a computer that was hosting the game of Pong, all right? So these are isolated neurons. They're not attached to a human. They're in a petri dish wired to a computer chip. They put them in the computer, and here's what happened. All of a sudden, those neurons began to play the game Pong. They played the game successfully, and the longer they played the game, the better they got. They learned from playing the game. All right? Now, I want you to just think about what's happening here, and then we're going to explore this a little bit. How does a neuron not attached to a human know how to play a computer game that has been around since 1972? How can that happen? This is what the scientists were struggling with. Where are the instructions for the game? How can neurons in a petri dish know how to play that game? Where are the instructions? Well, if you've read any of my books in the past, like the book The Divine Matrix, if you've listened to people like Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, you already know where we're going to go with this. Scientists released a report in the year 2012 and confirmed what many people have always sensed and suspected in their lives. There's a field of information that underlies all of existence, all right? There is a field of information, a field of energy that underlies all existence. Now, we've always talked about it in the New Thought community. We say, you know, of course. But from the scientific perspective, they struggled with that until the year 2012. If you want to know more about that, you can look it up, not now, but later. In the year 2012, the CERN superconducting supercollider in Geneva, Switzerland, released the paper that there is, in fact, a field of energy, and scientists now accept this. This is not controversial. The controversy is, what does it mean? Its existence is not controversial. So that field now is what many people in the past have called Akashic Records, or we've called it the Matrix, the Divine Matrix, the Planck field, zero-point field, all kinds of names. There's a field of energy. Energy is information. That's important. Energy is information. So how can these neurons in a petri dish know how to play this game? Well, here is the answer, and this is where your human body and the transhuman movement get really interesting in this conversation. The answer is that the instructions are not inside the neurons. All right, the information is not held in the neurons. You know, I was born and raised in Missouri. When I was in college, Albert Einstein's brain was in a glass jar at a neighboring college, University of Kansas. And when Einstein passed this world, they kept his brain. They thin-sectioned his brain. They said, what makes Einstein's brain so different from everyone else? And you know what the answer is? It looked pretty much like everyone else's brain, with one exception. There was one exception. And what they found is that Einstein's brain had a lot more folds in the brain than a typical human brain. And what that means is when you take that brain and you stretch those folds out, it means there's more surface area. It means there's more neurons. All right, why is that important? What we now know is the instructions for those neurons to play Pong, they're not inside the neuron. The neurons, and this is the key if you're taking notes, the neurons in the experiment are antennae that tune to the place in the field where the memory of Pong lives. Okay, they're antennae. Your neurons are antennae. Your DNA are antennae. The cell membranes in your body are antennae. And all of them are tuned to signals that we're receiving from the world around us. This is why your body is so important. Your divinity doesn't live in your body. Your body is the antenna that tunes to the place in the field where that information lives. None of your memories don't live in your body. I mean, you have muscle memory. I'm a guitar player, so I have muscle memory, that kind of memory. But the memories of your past, of your childhood, of all of your relationships, of all of your hiking experiences, all those things, they don't live in your brain. They don't live in your cells. Your brain and your cells are the antenna that tune to the place in the field where that information lives. That's why telepathy is possible. That's why remote viewing is possible. The ability to sit in a chair in a room and allow your consciousness to move in the field to another physical location on Earth or even not on Earth. And they've done experiments now in other worlds. Experiments, for example, they were remote viewing in the 1970s when the first spacecraft were going past the planet Jupiter. And one of the remote, and I talk about this in the book, one of the remote viewers at that time wanted to remote view to see Jupiter before the spacecraft actually sent the images back. And so he did a remote viewing session. He allowed his consciousness to move in time and space to see the planet Jupiter. And what he reported was that there were rings around the planet Jupiter. Well, the scientists at that time believed that he missed his target because they said, there are no rings in Jupiter. You must have seen Saturn. You're reporting on Saturn. So they thought he missed his target. A couple of months later, the first images of Jupiter came back. Lo and behold, Jupiter has rings. They're made of a material different than Saturn, so they don't show up on the telescopes. Saturn is icy rings that reflect light. Jupiter's rings are made of a different material, dust, that doesn't show up on the telescopes. So his remote viewing knew more about the planet than we knew until the actual photographs come back. How is that possible? Because the field allows consciousness to move through time and space to different locations. My childhood memories, yours, they're all in the field. Now, there are a lot of implications, a lot of interesting implications around this when it comes to things like dementia. I lost my mom to COVID just a couple of years ago, and she was in late-stage dementia. And I got to see what happens when we lose our connection with the field. And there's lots of reasons why that can happen. So this principle opens the door to a lot of discussion, a lot of conversations. But what I want you to focus on right here, the antenna tuned to the place in the field where Pong lives. What that means is the antenna in your body, the neurons, the DNA, the cell membranes in your body are antenna that tune to the place in the field where your divinity lives. Your whole body. Okay, DNA, membranes of the cells, neurons in the heart, neurons in the brain are the antenna that tune to the place in the field where divinity lives. So let me just ask you a question. If your body is the antenna and you begin to replace your body with synthetics, you begin to replace your natural chemistry and your natural biology with computer chips and chemicals and RFID chips and sensors, what does that mean for your body's ability to access your divinity? Well, there's a lot of you here, and I'm looking all over. I'm just going to tell you the answer right now. The more of your body that you lose to technology, the more difficult it becomes to access your divinity. That's the transhuman movement. The transhuman movement to replace us with that technology. Synthetic life cannot access divinity. So when you have problems thinking about this, come back to this experiment and just think about this. I mean, I'm still amazed, and I've shown this many, many times. Isolated neurons are able to play a game because those neurons are tuned to the field where that game lives. Think about it this way. If you've ever tried to learn a foreign language, French, Spanish, Tibetan was hard for me. That's a very interesting language to learn. Or music, as a musician. If I'm trying to learn a piece of music, guitar music, there's a guitarist, Stephen Vai. Some of you know Steve Vai. He's an amazing guitarist. And when I'm trying to learn a piece of his music, or I'm trying to learn a foreign language, at first it's awkward and we go through the motions. Phonetically, we say the words of the language. On my guitar, I'm, awkwardly finding those notes. And all of a sudden, one day you wake up and you're thinking French, or you're thinking Spanish, or you're thinking Tibetan, or you're playing like Steve Vai. How does that happen? Here's the deal. It takes about 72 hours. I'll show you the slide in a little while. It takes about 72 hours for the neurons in your body to connect to other neurons to form the antenna that tunes to the place in the field that supports what it is that you're trying to learn. Another way of saying this, it is the act, the very act of you striving to become something more in the next moment than you were in the moment before. The act of you striving to learn a language, to play a piece of music. The act of desiring and attempting to do that is the trigger for your neurons to form the neural network to become the antenna to tune to the place in the field where that language or that piece of music lives. It's all in that field. And it takes about 72 hours, about 3 days, for those neurons to do that. So if you have young people, kids, grandkids, they're trying to learn something in school and they don't pick it up immediately and they get frustrated, please encourage them to stay with it, at least 3 days. Stay with it and give those neurons the opportunity to come together so that they can tune to the place in the field to support that goal or that dream or that desire. So I hope that makes sense. Synthetic life cannot access divinity. So when we replace our brain tissue with computer chips, and we begin to replace different parts of our body with the technology inside of our bodies, what we're doing is we're giving away our ability to access the field, to access that divinity. Okay? Divinity begins with the way we think of ourselves. Now, I want to be really clear. I love technology. I think some of you know during the Cold War years, I was a senior computer systems designer. At that time, the company was called Martin Marietta Defense Systems. It's now Lockheed Martin. I was around some of the most advanced technology at that, laser systems, radar systems, communications. And that was then. That was back in the Cold War years. I have yet to see any technology built in the world around us that doesn't mimic what we already do in our bodies. And I'm going to prove that to you here in just a few minutes. So I have no problem with the technology outside of our bodies. It's when we begin replacing our natural biology with artificial technology, when we begin to relinquish our humanness. Those are the conditions that I'm talking about in the book, and that's what I'm talking about here today. So divinity, it begins with the way we think of ourselves. This is really, really interesting. Because the current story of biology, we go to a biology textbook, we're taught to think of ourselves as like soft, sticky, wet, gooey stuff inside the cells of our bodies. You know, it wasn't that long ago. It was only about 100 years ago, which isn't that long, human cells were thought to be little sacs of water in the body, saline water with some stuff floating around inside. I mean, we've come light years from that. So the current biological story sees our bodies as this soft, sticky, wet, gooey stuff. But here's what changed. Just a few years ago, the conventional thinking is that consciousness and emotion and empathy and sympathy, the traditional thinking in the scientific world out there that wants this transhuman movement, they believe that our consciousness can be reduced to ones and zeros and electrical impulses and stored on a computer chip. All right, scientists, there are groups of scientists now that are trying to download human consciousness and put it onto a computer chip. And the thinking is, if you can save your consciousness on a computer chip, then the body dies, and you load that chip into a new body or into a robot or something else, and you become immortal. This is the goal of the transhuman movement, immortality, one of the goals. All right? It's not working. And there's a good reason why it's not working, but let me just show you this a little bit. I want to show you Ray Kurzweil. Some of you know who Ray Kurzweil is. He's an author. He's a visionary. He's been around a long time. He's a brilliant man. He's a techie. He's a brilliant techie. Right now, he's director of engineering and AI at Google. So he is driving a lot of the Google AI. What he says in his talks, and he has a new book that came out recently called The Singularity. And what Kurzweil is saying in The Singularity, he's saying within our lifetimes, unless something changes, we will see in our lifetimes, you and I will be merged with the digital world and the natural world into a massive database run by artificial intelligence that regulates everything in our lives. That's the singularity that he is talking about, and we're well on our way to do that. The technology already exists, and now the policies are being put in place through the UN, through WEF, through all of these things. What he says very, very casually, he says that within our lifetimes, we will be downloading consciousness onto a computer chip. I don't think it's going to happen, and I'm going to tell you why. Because you and I are more than ones and zeros. We're more than the data. They're not taking into account consciousness. They're not taking into account the field. They're not taking into account our divinity that lives in the field. You can't capture that with ones and zeros. Consciousness is more than ones and zeros, than the electrical impulses. And science is going to have to come to terms with that, or they'll never be successful at what they're doing. But this is their thinking. This is their thinking, and you're seeing the technology move in this direction. All right, the new story, new human story. Remember, I said biology has always been thought of as sticky, gooey, wet stuff in the cells. A few years ago, that changed, and this is really, really interesting, because scientists began to look at the human body not as biology, but from an IT perspective, information technology. Scientists began to look at the human body as information technology. Now, I'm going to run through a few slides. I want to show you exactly what I mean. And if you've never seen this, this is a very, very different way of thinking. We are literally, this isn't a metaphor, a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology. Now, what is soft technology? Hard technology is a computer chip. It's a wire. It's chemical. RFID chips. Nano sensors moving through the body. Soft technology. We're more than that hard technology. We're neurons. We're cell membranes. We're ion potentials moving across cell walls. And we self-regulate all of it in a way that scientists are struggling to replicate in the library. They can't do it. They cannot do what you and I do. So let me show you this, soft technology. Scientists say that the average human body has about 50 trillion or so cells in the body. Then that's an average, that's a lot of cells. Every one of those cells is literally an electrical circuit. Now think about that. I was working in the industry during the Cold War. And the Cold War was it was a very civilized war. It was a very interesting war because the governments were at war, but the scientists were still cooperating. I mean, think about it. We built the International Space Station with the country we were at war with. And it was during that time that Russian scientists began to release research papers showing this, what you're seeing on your screen. That is an electrical circuit. It has an input, has an output. That circuit is one human cell. They said, we literally, every cell in our bodies is an electrical circuit, and it has all the components of a circuit. Every cell in the human body generates a little bit of electricity, small amount, 0.07 volts of electrical potential. And you say, wow, that's not very much, and I would agree with you, 0.07 volts is not very much, but let's do the math here. If we've got 50 trillion cells, and you got 0.07 volts in each cell, 50 trillion times 0.07, I'll just do it for you, make it easy, 3.5 trillion volts of electrical potential in your body right now. Potential. Doesn't mean it's realized. It can be. What would it mean if you could harness 3.5 trillion volts and focus on the healing in your body? Or focus on deep intuition in your life? or focus on resilience in your life, or longevity enzymes that await, or stem cells. I mean, this is the potential that we're looking at right here. So every cell, 3.5 trillion volts of electrical potential, but doesn't stop there. Look at this. Every cell in your body functions as a transistor or a resistor or a capacitor. It stores and releases information. Now, I'm smiling a little bit here. I was just with a group a couple of weeks ago, and there were a lot of young people in that group. And they looked at these components on the screen, and they said, "What in the world are those?" Because I've never seen these before. And I said, "Well, these are electrical components. Now you know them like this. It's a little microprocessor." And they said, "Oh, well, we know what that is." And I said, "Well, in one lifetime, all those components have been miniaturized onto that cell. So, or onto that microprocessor. So every cell in the body has a circuit, transistors, resistors, capacitors, but it doesn't stop there. Because every cell in your body releases light as photons. Photons are little particles of light, and it absorbs particles of light. Well, light is information. So that means you are constantly releasing information into the world around you. You're absorbing information into the world around you. What are you saying to the world? And the information that you're releasing, what are you saying to the world? Do you even know what you're saying to the world? Every cell in your body has little receptors on the outside that are literally antennae that are tuned to certain parts of the field to give you life and vitality. This is why it's important to maintain your body. Every cell in your body stores and retrieves information, just like a computer chip, just like we do with a computer chip. Every cell in your body is functioning in these ways. The human pineal gland at the very center of your brain. I know a lot of you have worked in workshops and been with other people talking about the pineal. Is truly an amazing gland. It is a mineral-based gland that functions as a transducer. So what does that mean? It is transducing, converting information from the world around us into pictures inside of us. That one little gland is taking that information, waves of information, electrical and magnetic information and other kinds of information, converting it into pictures that we see in our mind and then inform our brain to tell our bodies how to function in the world. That one little gland. Every cell in your body, you're going to love this. Every cell in your body stores a record of every successful genetic transaction from our entire species from the very beginning of when the first of our kind emerged on this planet. That record, you carry that record of our entire species. That record is transparent, it's secure, and it is immutable. You can't change it, all right, in the species. Now, why don't you think about this? If you're plugged into modern information technology, information that is stored in a way that is transparent, immutable, and secure is the technology that we're building in the world around us that's transforming the financial system, decentralized finance in the world. The new economic systems that are emerging, it's called blockchain technology. Blockchain technology is successful because it actually mimics the very principles that we use to store information inside of our bodies. Blockchain technology is the basis for Bitcoin. If you're interested in Bitcoin, it is actually mimicking the way that your body stores information and so much more. I could go on and on with this. The whole point is that our bodies are a soft technology. Now, I want you to see this. I mentioned that scientists are thinking of us from an IT perspective, and this is an example from a paper. It's called Proceedings of Soft Computing Theories and Applications Conference. And I know all of you have a beautiful hardbound copy of Proceedings of Soft Computing Theories and Applications Conference on your bedstand for light bedtime reading, just like I do, because we all like to read these things, right? But this is an example. New discoveries of the human body that are published in obscure technical journals. They're not published in your kids' biology textbooks and in the classrooms of public schools. Look at what this says. Literally says, and this is a quote, "We report that DNA structure behaves as a fractal antenna which can interact with the electromagnetic fields over a wide range of frequencies." So what are they saying? What is a fractal antenna? What it means, the word antenna, you know what an antenna is. An antenna tunes to a signal. Fractal antenna means that we have an array of antenna that is tuned to a broad spectrum of information. We're pulling in data. We're pulling in information across a broad spectrum that's happening all at the same time on the fractal level, the small level mirroring what the larger level is doing. So here the scientists are actually saying DNA is a fractal antenna. They're also saying that neurons are an antenna, that cell membranes are an antenna. We're communicating with our world all the time. Well, computer chips, AI, chemicals in our blood, all of these things, they mimic. They mimic the technology, except guess what? We do it better. And I love this slide. We do it better. Now, I know that's a big statement. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. And if you've never seen this before, it gives you the reasons to think differently about yourself and in your capability in the world. You know, when I'm with, again, young people come to these programs, seminars, and they have been conditioned to worship technology. A lot of young people, they worship the AI. They worship computer chips. You know, nothing can be better than a computer chip. And they're amazed at what I'm about to show you. So let me just do this. Scientists did a few experiments, and one of them was they compared a computer chip to the human brain. And what they found is that we meet, and in many cases, we exceed the capacity of that computer chip. And you say, well, how in the world can that be possible? Well, here's the reason. A computer chip. Computer chips are definitely fast, no doubt. And they are definitely efficient, absolutely no doubt. But here's the thing. They are limited. A computer chip will always be limited by the physics of the stuff that the chip is made of. All right, so you've got a silicon atom showing on the screen right now. And if it is a silicon-based computer chip, which is what we're pretty much using right now, the information can never travel faster than the way that those electrons and the way the atoms of silicon allow information to move. All right, so is the chip fast? Yes. Is it scalable? Is it scalable, or does it have a limit? Its scalability is finite. It will reach a limit. And this is actually happening now. Scientists are saying that we have reached the limit of how fast a computer can compute using silicon. So now they're looking at other materials, and of course they're looking at quantum computing. That's another conversation. But these are conventional computer chips. They're fast, but their scalability is finite. Now, let's look at this, a human brain. What is the top end of a human brain? Well, this is so cool because it is not limited by the physics of the tissue. Here's what happens. Every time scientists think the human brain has reached a limit, they'll push the brain to that limit, and then the brain does what we humans do. It will morph and adapt to those new conditions and open up a whole new spectrum, a whole new array of possibilities, and it does it again and again and again. A computer chip cannot do that. It's limited by those atoms. So just give you an example. When I was in school back 1950s, 60s, early 70s, textbooks all said that a human brain can not compute faster than 40 cycles per second, or 40 hertz is the way they noted that in the textbooks. It was in all the books, medical books, that was accepted. One day in the 80s, some Tibetan monks were being studied. And the monks said, well, if we do a certain kind of meditation, you know, we can exceed that 40 hertz. So they did a meditation, and all of a sudden, their brains were functioning at 80 cycles per second, 80 hertz. And the scientists said, well, okay, maybe we got it wrong once. We'll change the textbooks, but the human brain cannot possibly function beyond these 80 cycles per second, 80 hertz. And the monks said, well, if we do another kind of meditation, you know where this is going to go, right? If we do another kind of meditation, we can exceed that. So all of a sudden, they're functioning at 100 cycles per second. A new brain state had to be created that is now called the gamma brain state. They published that in the books, and then pretty soon they were doing some research, and the monks said, well, if we do a different kind of meditation, we can exceed even that. And they went to 140 cycles per second, and then they went to 200 cycles per second, and now a new brain state is in the textbooks called the hyper gamma brain state. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the monks went to the other end of the spectrum. And they said, if we do a certain kind of meditation, we can slow the brain waves down to less than 1 hertz, less than 1 cycle per second. And typically, if you see someone less than 1 cycle per second, and they're considered unalive in this world, all right? And the monks went into this meditation. They lowered their brain states to less than a hertz, less than 1 cycle per second. Here's the thing. They're very awake. They're very conscious. They're in an altered state that is poorly understood. And all of this is telling us that the capacity that we have in our neurons and our brain states, we're only beginning to understand. They exceed the abilities of a fixed computer chip. And that's the point that I want to make here. So we're not limited by the physics. What is our scalability? We don't know. We don't know what the upper end is. It appears to be infinite, because the brain morphs and adapts to accommodate the new conditions, and we do it every time. We do it every time. All right, the Salk Institute, Stanford University in California, did a study, and I think this was in the early 2000s. They did a really interesting study where they compared an entire brain, not just a neuron, but a human brain to a computer chip. And the way they did this, and I was fascinated by this. We're going to do a meditation here in a little while to implement some of this, but I want you to have the reasons to think differently here. What they found was that the synapse in the human brain is the equivalent of a transistor in a computer chip. So that's why they're able to make that comparison. So where the information is moving between the neurons is comparable to the transistors on the computer chip. All right, so they did some measurements. Now, I'm just going to cut to the chase here. I'm going to go to the bottom line. If you're a computer expert right now, excuse me, you already know some of this. We measure computer speed in gigahertz, all right? 1 gigahertz is 1 billion instructions per second. Right now, the fastest conventional computers max out at 6 gigahertz, so that's 6 billion instructions per second. Those are the dual core processors, if you're following any of that. All right, 6 billion instructions per second. Now check this out. The human brain, the study showed, was 100 billion instructions per second for the human brain. The bottom line, the conclusion to this paper, I'm going to get close. This was published in Current Biology, Volume 18, September, and this was back in 08 and 09, so who knows where it is now. The conclusion is that the human brain processes 100-fold more information than a modern microprocessor using multiple cores. Do you know how astounding that is? It's a very different way to think about the human body. We're thinking of not just even the brain, because we're going to begin looking at neurons in the heart. And we're going to use neurons in the heart to access the field to give us information. That is an expression of human divinity. And as we develop that expression, we become healthier, and we're able to navigate the changes in the world in a healthy way. That's where we're going with this whole thing. We are scalable. We are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology. We're scalable beyond any known limits right now. We are self-replicating technology. We are self-regulating technology. We're self-diagnosing technology. We're self-healing technology. We are self-actualizing technology. Scientists are struggling in the lab to replicate in artificial life what you and I do in our biology. And we're so good at it, we don't even give it a second thought. We don't even think about it. So I'm calling this out now, hopefully so you can have a deeper appreciation for this technology that we have in our bodies. This is why our humanness and our body is the key to our divinity. If you don't have a body, you don't have a body that has the antenna, the neurons, the cells, then you lose access, or your access to your divinity is degraded. I'm just thinking, I don't have a slide for this, but let me just give you an example. We've had virtual reality visors long enough now that studies can be done with young people who are using them over long periods of time, and they're being published in psychology journals and things like that. So there was a study that was done, young children, both male and female, about between 3 and 5 years old. They were allowed to have virtual reality visors for about 3 hours a day, day after day after day, over a period of months. All right, while their parents were working, this kept the kids entertained. Here's what's happening. The kids are watching in those virtual reality visors. They're seeing things they would never see with their friends in their backyard. All right, they're seeing scenarios, they're hearing sounds, they're seeing colors that they would never see in the real world. But here's the catch. They are simply observing. They're just watching it being done for them. They're not imagining. They're not creating. I mean, think about it. I have a younger brother, 4 years younger than I am. When we were kids, we used our imaginations all the time, almost every day. For example, in our living room, we'd have 2 chairs side by side. We'd throw a blanket over those 2 chairs, and now you have a tent. All right, but not just any tent. You've got a tent on another planet in an unknown world, and we'd put on our raincoat, yellow raincoats and a yellow rain hat that would be radiation suits so that we could go explore on this unknown planet. And it sounds silly to talk about, but the point is we were using our imagination. These young kids using the AI visors, what's happening, and this is the reason they published it in the psychology journals, is that they were stunted in so many ways. Their brain size was smaller than it should have been for children their age. Their body was underdeveloped. Their muscles were atrophied because they weren't using them. Communication skills were stunted. Their problem-solving skills were stunted. But look at this. There was a part of their brain that was larger than it should have been for a child their age. The visual cortex was enlarged. Now, it makes perfect sense, because the visual part of their brain is what's being exercised. They're watching the AI. They're not imagining, they're not creating, but they're just watching it. Now, all of that can be reversed through epigenetics. Kids, when they stop watching the virtual reality, they start playing outside, start using their bodies. All of those things are reversible. But this was the point of the study, that when we don't use it or lose it, when we don't use our brains and our bodies, those abilities begin to atrophy. So what's it mean? You put computer chips in your brain that begin to do work for you. The part of your brain where that computer chip is says it's not needed anymore. There was a study, and I talk about this in the book. There was a study done a few years ago. We used to think that when we are born into this world, we have all of the brain cells already intact. It was a finite number that you come into the world with. And throughout your life, the choices that you make, how much beer and wine you drink, or, what drugs you do are going to kill those brain cells. And people used to joke about that all the time. Have another beer, lose some brain cells in college. But here's what they found. There's a part of the brain that continues to produce new brain cells until the last breath you take in this world. It's called the hippocampus. And those brain cells are produced. However, there's a catch. And the catch is that even though the brain is producing those new cells, if the new cells are not engaged in a meaningful way within about 7 days, within about a week, they will atrophy and they will die because the body feels that they're not needed. If they were needed, they would be used. So when we put a computer chip into the brain, that chip, the parts of the brain function that chip replaces, those neurons feel like they're no longer needed and they begin to atrophy and they begin to die. That principle applies to everything in your body, to your immune system. It applies to your reproductive system. It applies to everything in your body, not just in the brain, but I use that as an example. So this is why your body, it's like the slide says, your body is the key to your divinity. So now the question, we're talking about this soft technology. How do we operate this soft technology? Well, this is where it gets really, really, really interesting. See, it was already really, really interesting. Now it's going to be really, really, really interesting. One of the things that I learned when I was in the industry, working with all this advanced technology, was that the more sophisticated the technology is behind the scenes, the simpler the user interface. Now, you already know that. If you got a smartphone, when you look at that smartphone, use your finger, one finger, and you touch a picture, and you set into motion a whole cascade of events. You can pay your bills, you can talk to your friends. All you did was touch a picture. That is a very sophisticated technology represented by a simple user interface. You and I work the same way. Our interface, what is the user interface for our soft technology? You already know it. It's thoughts, feelings, emotions, breath, focus, movement, nutrition. These are our user interfaces. They're the core principles in our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions. All right? So we are going to operate through this user interface, so we're going to use some of this technology. Let me say a couple of words about it, and then we'll take a break, and we'll come back fresh from the break, and we'll start using this. I want you to have a little break before we do this. This is the 46th year that I've had the privilege of doing this work in one form or another. And in those 46 years, I have been blessed to travel when travel was easy into some of the most remote and isolated and beautiful and magnificent and pristine places remaining on the planet today, the archaeological sites that hold the traditions of many of those from our past. Some of you have traveled with me. Some of you have been into the Yucatan and Peru and Egypt and Bolivia and Tibet and Greece and the Aboriginal traditions and all the things that we've done. And I've had the opportunity to go to places like this. What you're seeing on this screen is a Tibetan monastery. It's almost 18,000 feet above, I guess it's a meter, about 6,000 meters above sea level. And it's in places like this where we met the women that in the nunneries and the men in the monasteries, so that we could learn their traditions in addition to seeing the temples and seeing the ancient texts. And I had the opportunity to be with the monks and the nuns, and in this case, one of the abbots in the monastery. I had the opportunity to lead. I just finished my 48th tour in 46 years to Peru, 48th tour into the villages and to be with the people and now their children and their grandchildren that we've known since the 1980s. And we have the opportunity to learn their traditions. Much of the native population in Peru is matriarchal. These are matriarchal societies. The women run the business and the men work for the women, and it works really well for everybody. I love this. We've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in the jungles of the Yucatan. And I was working with this particular shaman who I just learned has just left this world. He just passed recently. So I'm glad we have these photos because I'll never see him again. But the point is that we learn from all these people. We've been to these beautiful monasteries in the Holy Lands where some of the most ancient and cherished texts remain. And in places like this is St. Catherine's Monastery. Some of you have been there with me. The top of Mount Sinai. You know, on the outside, it looks very primitive. There's no electricity. They use oil-based lamps. It looks very primitive on the outside. And then you go inside and you see the library. And the library holds some of the oldest images. This image, for example, of Jesus of Nazareth was painted by people who had actually seen Jesus of Nazareth. So maybe one of the most accurate images that we see of him. The common theme in all these traditions, as different as they are from one another, there's a common theme. And that common theme is simply this, that our power begins in the heart. Our divinity begins in the human heart. We come back from our break. We'll find that literally the human heart is the doorway to our divinity. I'm going to share with you some new studies, and then we're going to begin some exercises. We're going to do a couple of processes. You may call them meditations. So I'm going to invite you, if you can be in a place where you can close your eyes safely and don't have a lot of interruptions. If you are listening to this broadcast and you are driving or operating heavy machinery, don't do these exercises. Wow, thank you all for staying with me. You guys doing okay? Yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down? Oh, thank you for the thumbs up. I appreciate that. Well, I took my jacket off because we're going to do some work. We're going to start using our soft technology here in just a few minutes in this studio. And what I'd like to do in this next session, we're going to begin talking about the human heart. And we're going to do some exercises with the heart. And then I'll do a couple of questions right after that. I mean, we could do all day on Q&A, and I don't want to use your time for that. I guess I want you all to know, I know that you're busy. You have families, you have jobs. This is a weekday. I don't know how you got away from work, but thank you for doing it. Unless you're watching secretly on your work computer. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate that. I know your time's important. I want to honor our time. And we've got so many questions that we could answer. I want to share the information first, then we'll get to a couple of questions, all right? Before the break, we were talking about our bodies as soft technology. And I went through, and there's more that we could have done. I want you to have a sense that you're so much more than just, sticky, wet, gooey, mushy biology stuff. I mean, there is a system that we are operating. Let me just give you an example of something. I mean, even the ability for me to be here and speak with you, we take it for granted. When we speak in this world, I'm going to invite you to think about this. Think about what happens when we speak in this world. For me to say something to you, it begins with a thought in my mind, all right? So I have a thought that I want to convey to you. And then what I do is I invite the breath of life from the air around me. In one of the most intimate acts that you could imagine, I'm inviting the air out there to penetrate deep into my body, into the cells, actually into the nucleus of every cell. I inhale that breath. And then I begin to flutter my diaphragm in just the right way to force the air I just inhaled back over the path in the reverse direction as I exhale that breath by fluttering the diaphragm, and as it leaves my body, I am using two muscles at the base of my throat, my vocal cords, to vibrate those muscles in just the right way in that air to create the acoustic pattern, the geometric pattern that matches my thought, all right? Creating the acoustic patterns that then leave my body and travel through the airwaves, and now the technology to touch your skin and to land on your eardrums so that you can interpret the acoustic patterns that I just created to share these ideas. I mean, wow, what an amazing thing to do. And you and I do this all the time. That's how powerful we are, but we don't think about this. No other form of life can do what you and I do. Chimpanzees, share 98% of our DNA. That's almost all of it, except for, 2%. I'm a musician, and I've always wondered, if a chimpanzee shares 98% of my DNA, why is it that I've never heard a chimpanzee sing, never heard a chimpanzee sing Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven? Why not? The reason is because you and I were given a gift when we first appeared on this earth 200,000 years ago. We've only been here for 10,000 generations. It's not that long, 10,000 generations. 10,000 generations ago, there was a genetic mutation that happened that connects our tongue and our brain and our jaw in a way that happened with no other form of life, no other primate, that allows us to do what I just shared with you. No other form of life can do that. And it happened at exactly the same time. 2 chromosomes were merged into human chromosome number 2 to give us the neocortex, to give us empathy, sympathy, compassion, love, forgiveness, self-regulation. No other form of life can do that. And they happened at exactly the same time. It's not the product of evolution. It's not random mutations. It didn't happen slowly, gradually over a long period of time. It happened quickly. And those mutations have been with us ever since. It's what gives us our divinity, our ability to access the field in the way that we do. And I want you to consider that. And before the end of the day, I'm going to share with you that there literally, not metaphorically, but literally is an ancient message coded into the DNA of every one of those 50 trillion cells that gives you the reason to accept your own divinity. So what we're doing right now is not so much in the book. Later today, I'll tell you what chapters we're using, and I will take a little Q&A later. Before our break, I said to you that our power begins in the human heart. I think you probably sense that the heart is a very, very powerful part of our being. The human heart, your heart, I'll be personal. Your heart is the first organ that developed in your body when you were in your mother's womb. It developed before the brain. And one of the mysteries of modern science today, this is fascinating to me, in one moment, that heart, your heart, is just a mass of cells in the womb of your mother, and the next instant, the heart begins to beat. And the question is why? Well, science have a million theories about why. They talk about chemical potentials, and they talk about electrical potentials. Every indigenous tradition that I've ever studied with, the Tibetans, the monks, the nuns, the abbots, the Bedouin in the deserts of Egypt, the Quechua in the Andes of Peru, the shamans in the Yucatan, all through the American desert Southwest, and others. They all tell the same story. Isn't that interesting? They tell the same story, but they're so very different. And what they say is that the moment our heart begins to beat is the moment the soul comes into the body. The soul is information from the field, and it holds an electrical potential. And it comes into the body, and that is when the heart begins to beat. Excuse me. So whether you accept that or not, and whether that's true or not, it's a way of thinking for indigenous people. Our power begins in the heart. Heart is the doorway to our divinity. Only recently, modern science has begun to think of the heart a little bit differently. Some of you have seen this, some have never seen this before. 1991, a discovery was made, wasn't even published until 1994. So it took from 91 to 94 to validate this mind-blowing discovery, and then a new scientific journal had to be created to report the discovery because of what it reflected. Now look at the name of the journal. It's at the bottom of your screen. It's the journal Neurocardiology. Those 2 words, that tells the whole story right there. Neuro is all about neurons in the brain. Cardiology is about the heart. And this is what the discovery was all about. 91, they discovered about 40,000 specialized cells in the human heart. They're called sensory neurites. And that is a technical term. They're essentially brain cells, but they're not in the brain. They're in the heart. Why do we have brain cells in the heart? Well, this opens a whole new doorway of thinking when it comes to us and our potential in the world. And we're going to explore just a little bit of that today. This neural network in the heart, it's actually called the little brain in the heart. These 40,000 specialized cells in the heart, they think separately from the brain in the head, all right? They remember separately from the brain in the head. They feel separately from the brain in the head, and they communicate differently with the field from the brain in the head. So right there, we could do a whole day program just on this. Think about what it means. For example, it means every experience that you and I have ever had, we're in this world together. Every experience we've ever had, we have experienced it and recorded it in two places, in the heart as well as the brain. So most experiences, if they're good experiences or if they're problems that we resolve, no big deal. What happens if we have a trauma early in life? What if you're 3 years old and you have a trauma and you don't have the tools to deal with that trauma? Well, it's recorded in the brain, it's recorded in the heart. You may be 60 or 70 years old and now you're trying to work it out. And you go to a therapist and the therapist speaks with you about your trauma, and that can help and it can be good. For many people, it's incomplete. And if it feels incomplete to you, if this has happened to you, this may be helpful in understanding why, because part of that experience is recorded in the heart. The heart thinks and feels differently than the brain. The heart has its own language. It's not about words. It's not about words. It's about emotions moving chemistry in the heart. Now, I'm just barely scratching the surface with this now. I just want you to know, if you want more about that, go to our website, our 4-day programs. We spend a couple of those days addressing those emotions. The chemicals are called neuropeptides, and addressing how to heal those neuropeptides as they're moving from the heart. So there is more information. It's beyond the scope of what I can do well in here today. The point is that the heart does more than pump blood in our bodies. It may be the least of what our heart does. You can build a machine to pump the blood, but our heart does so much more. All right, thinks, remembers, feels. It communicates with the field, and we communicate with the heart, and we're going to do this. We're going to do this right now. And I want you to see this is not a metaphor. It really helps if you can see that what we're talking about is real. This is very real. So what you're seeing on the screen, this is the first three-dimensional map of a heart. And what I want you to see is, if you look at the top of the screen, see the yellow, all the little yellow dots, those are the special cells. Those are the sensory, here, I'm going to highlight it for you right there. There it is. Those are the sensory neurites in the heart, right there. Now, this is where this soft technology comes in. You and I have the ability to do something that no other form of life can do. And that in itself is a celebration. We're going to celebrate an ability that no other form of life can do. And here it is. You know you've got neurons in the brain. You know you've got neurons in the heart. We are the only form of life, at will, on demand, when we choose. We're the only form of life that can harmonize two neural networks into one potent system. Think about that. Two separate neural networks. We can sit down in a chair in a moment in time. You can sit behind your computer and say, in this moment, I choose. I choose to harmonize my heart and my brain. We'll talk about the benefits in a moment. No other form of life can do that. When you do that, it is called coherence. And we're talking about a coherence in two neural networks between the heart and the brain. Now, there are different levels of coherence. The optimum level is when you send a signal from your heart to your brain, very low frequency, 0.1 hertz, 0.1, less than 1. When you send 0.1 hertz from your heart to your brain, that is when you harmonize these two separate organs into a single potent system. Now, I want you to know this is a very natural state of being. and that you were in coherence when you were in your mother's womb, and shortly after you were born, depending upon your family, until you were conditioned out of it by being led to engage with the world. As you began to engage with the world around you, you're less focused in the world within you, okay? And that's okay. That's what we do in life. But this, it may feel like a very natural feeling. Some of you have created this coherence. Some have never done this before. You know what's interesting is when we do this alone, it feels different than we do it with a lot of people. And even though we are a virtual audience of about over 3,500 are with us right now. So in the field, we are all connected in that field. And you may feel that. As you go into this state, you're not alone in this state. And don't be surprised if you feel that sense. Why would we want to create heart-brain coherence? Well, there are two qualities of benefits. There are passive benefits and there are active benefits. What does that mean? Passive means just by creating the coherence and doing nothing else, the act of creating that coherence is going to give you benefits in the body, such as a super immune system. You're all about to have stronger immune systems right now. We're going to do this together. You'll have a better immune system, and you will all be younger. You have to be, because one of the benefits is you awaken the longevity enzymes that you all have in your body. You awaken them so they can do what they're designed to do. So that's worth being together today. We're all going to have a better immune system. We're all going to be healthier. We're all going to be younger. Couldn't ask for more than that. But a super immune system. I'm just going to tell you a little story. The Institute of Heart Math in Northern California is a pioneering research institute exploring the power of the human heart. I have worked with them almost since their inception. 30 years ago, we celebrated 30 years we've been working together. I'm not their employee, but we tour together, we do webinars, we do fundraisers, and they've given me permission as an independent author to share their work with you. So I'm going to give a shout out to HeartMath for all of their work and for their trust in me, so I can share this with you. The reason I'm saying that is because their chief researcher, years ago, back in the early 90s, they were doing experiments. They had people take tissue from inside their mouth, just a little cotton swab inside the mouth, SIGA, that's the first line of your immune defense in the human body. And they would do the swabs before and after creating coherence, which we're going to do in just a minute. And they sent these to independent laboratories. And one of those laboratories called and said, wow, HeartMath, what is this antibiotic that you're creating? And HeartMath says, we're not creating an antibiotic. What are you talking about? And he said, no. He said, the immune response from these cells, it's more than anything we've seen in these antibiotics. He said, what is this? And HeartMath said, honestly, it's no antibiotic. This is natural human ability through coherence. And the guy at the lab didn't believe me. He says, oh, yeah, sure, you know, your secret is safe with me. You know, I won't tell anybody. It was an antibiotic. We're more powerful than the antibiotics when we give our bodies what they need to do what our bodies know how to do. All right? And I want to be very clear. I'm not saying we don't need antibiotics. So there are times when we've all used them. But I want you to know that you have a very powerful immune response that you can enhance through what we're going to do right now. So super immunity. Stress relief, super stress relief. Here's why this is important. You all know when you're stressed, typically, if you have emotional stress, relationship stress, financial stress, traffic stress, you know about that. There are kinds of stress that you're probably not aware of that go all the way down to the molecular, to the DNA level. For example, if you go to a restaurant and you eat foods that are cooked in oils that are not prepared properly. Now, you can do that and it tastes good. Your body has to work to compensate for those seed oils that have been used to cook at high heat. And your body knows how to do that. That is a form of stress at the molecular level. If you drink water that's full of chemicals, it's full of fluoride, it's full of pollutants, you can do that, and it's okay, but your body is working at a molecular level. You're not aware of it. So the point is that you are experiencing stress that you're probably not even aware of because your body's working to compensate for all of that. What we're going to do when you create coherence, it relieves not only emotional stress, but it relieves stress all the way down to that molecular level. This is self-regulation. All of these are expressions of divinity. Remember divinity, the ability to transcend perceived limitations. This is you at your best. This is the best version of you when you can awaken this potential that was given to you as a human body. It's a potential not available if you replace your body with synthetics. Synthetics can't do this stuff. All right, so super stress relief. Super stem cells, in the book I talk about, new class of stem cells has been found. And it is the coherence relieving the stress in the body that actually triggers those stem cells. Super resilience to change. When you were really young, change was probably easier for you. It usually is for kids. Kids adapt to change really well. If you look at their heart, it'll tell you why. So when you look at a heartbeat on an EKG, you've got what's called the QRS complex. QRS complex. R is that big peak. Boom, 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 boom. The time from one big beat to the next to peak, to the next peak, to the next peak, it varies from beat to beat to beat. Just a little bit, it varies. When you're young, it varies a lot more than when you get older. As we age, our heartbeat becomes more regular, okay? That variability is called just that, heart rate variability, or HRV. So here's the key. The more heart rate variability you have, the greater resilience you have to change. Here's the rest of the equation. The greater the heart-brain coherence, the greater the heart rate variability, the greater the resilience to change. So heart-brain coherence gives you greater resilience in the world, all right? Super longevity, we all have longevity enzymes. They need to be awakened, they need to be triggered. Reducing the stress on the molecular level with heart-brain coherence is the key. It's the trigger to awakening those longevity enzymes, all right? And there's more. I'm just giving you a little bit. Just by doing the coherence, these are the benefits. Now, there are active benefits that we'll talk about in a moment, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. So what I'd like to do, let's put this to work. Let's try this out. This isn't going to be a big deal meditation. I just want you, my goal is, number one, so that you have the techniques that become second nature, become very natural. And then to be able to trust what happens when you're in this space, all right? So there's only 3 steps. This is the Institute of Heart Math. They've given me permission to share this with you in the way that I am. Thank you, Heart Math. We appreciate you. We're going to go through 3 steps. We're going to shift our focus. We're going to shift our breathing. We're going to shift the feelings that we're having. I'm going to talk you through the whole thing so you don't have to remember anything. Are you good with that? We've done a lot of talking. We've covered a lot of ground. You ready to do something? Yes, no? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Oh, man, look at all the thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you for that. So what I'm going to invite you to do is put away your iPhones, iPads, pencils, papers. Be in a place that's comfortable, that's safe. Again, don't do this if you're driving or listening while you're driving. Do it at another time. I'm going to ask our team to provide some music. And you should hear, can I see a thumbs up? Are you hearing a little music in the background? So the system is working. Isn't it beautiful when the system works? And this is a beautiful system we have here. All right. So we've covered a lot of ground in these sessions. And the goal was to give you the reasons to think and feel differently about yourselves. I want you to feel differently about the potential within your body. And this idea that your body is the link to your divinity. It's powerful, powerful belief, powerful concept. So I'm going to invite you to do now, if you haven't done so already. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. I'm going to do the same thing right here. We're in this together. I invite you to close your eyes and allow your awareness to move from the world around you to the world within you. All right? And the first step, I'm going to invite you to shift your focus from your thinking mind to your feeling heart. One of the things I learned from those indigenous people that I shared with you earlier, almost universally, when they want to be in their hearts, what they will do is touch their heart center gently in a way that's comfortable to them. Sometimes it's one or two fingers over the heart center. Sometimes it's a full palm opened up. Sometimes it is the prayer mudra placed, nestled into the heart center. Here's the key. Your awareness will always go to the place where you feel the touch on your body. So when you touch the center of your chest, your energetic heart center, when you touch that, your awareness is going right to that touch. And this is the first step. Focus on the heart. Okay? And to the best of your ability, I'm going to invite you to hold your focus on the heart. And that first step. The second step. We're going to slow our breathing just a little bit slower than we would typically breathe. It's going to be different for everyone. So here's the key. I'm going to lead us an inhale of 4 and a release to 6. If that doesn't work for you, the key is to release for a period of time longer than the inhale. That's the key. When we exhale for a period of time longer than we inhale, that is the trigger to the parasympathetic nervous system that triggers that relaxation response, and that's what we want in the body. All right? So with your focus in your heart, from step number 1, I'm inviting you to breathe as if your breath is coming from your heart, step number 2. And let's do this together at a pace that's comfortable for you. First breath, inhale, begin. And release. Inhale. And release, and just feel that shift in your body. One more time, inhale. Release. Your breath is a language to your body. You're speaking to your body right now. Inhale. Release. This is the language that you used before you spoke. The language of breath. One more time. Inhale. And release. Just feel the shift in your body. Now, to the best of your ability, I'm going to invite you to continue breathing at that pace as if the breath is coming from your heart while you hold the focus at your heart center. And now step number 3. Step number 3, I'm going to invite you to do something no other form of life can do. I'm inviting you to have a feeling because you choose to have the feeling rather than waiting for the world to give you the reason to have the feeling. That's a powerful, powerful ability because every feeling has a chemistry in the body. You choose a feeling, you choose to shift the chemistry in your body at will, on demand, no matter what's happening in the world around you. No other form of life can do that. So with your focus in your heart, slowing your breathing as if it's coming from your heart, we invite you to feel a positive emotion. Let's go with gratitude. It works pretty much for everyone. I'm inviting you to feel gratitude for anyone or anything as if it's coming from your heart while you breathe slower from your heart. That's easy for me because I am so grateful to be with you in this way today. Our global tribe, we have people here with us from all over the world, from Japan, from Austria, from the UK, from Australia, all of North America, to this beautiful technology of Sage Studios. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. We are family right now. Thank you. Thank you for the gift of my body that allows me to be part of this family right now. Just feel the feeling. To the best of your ability, hold that feeling in your heart as you breathe slower and hold the focus. It's all about the heart. Slow your breath. Sage AV team, can I ask you to please just fade that music down completely, please? All right, with one more breath, I'm going to invite you to inhale. And as you release that breath, become present in the space where you find yourself. Gently begin to open your eyes. Let me see a show of hands. How many have never done this before? Never done this before? Okay, there are people out there who've never done. How many have done it, but have never done it with a group? Okay. Let me ask this. How many of you, when you went into your heart, had a little tear come to your eye? Anybody have a little tear come to your eye? Let me see the thumb. Okay, and if you can't see all the other people that I'm seeing, what I want you to know is that almost everyone is giving me a thumbs up or showing me their hands. They have a tear. And I'm not surprised, and this is why I'm asking. I want you to know that tear does not mean that you're sad. It could, but typically it doesn't. I mentioned earlier that this space is very familiar to you from when you were young, and if you haven't done it for a while, your body recognizes that, and when you go into the coherence, your body says, oh, welcome home. It's good to have you back. It's a sense of recognition, a deep sense of connection. This is passive coherence. We're going to do active coherence in just a moment. But I wanted you to have this experience. The researchers recommend holding this space for about 3 minutes and do it on a daily basis. Now, I typically do this before I sleep at night so that I am regenerating in coherence. But you can do this anytime throughout the day. If you know that you're going to have a difficult conversation with someone, it's good to create that coherence before you engage in the conversation. It allows you to be more objective. And you'll see why that is in just a moment. If you've had a difficult conversation, if you're having anxiety, if you're in panic, this is really useful to help manage and mitigate the effects of anxiety and panic. Okay, and we'll do Q&A in just a few minutes. You can ask me some questions about that if you'd like. But I wanted you to have just the technique, and that's what we have just done. Now we're going to take this a step further. I I'm going to take this a step further, and then we'll come back to the Q&A. Let me take this the next step, and we're going to come back to the Q&A. The active benefits of heart coherence. What do I mean by that? Once you get into the space of coherence, there are many applications that can come from being in coherence. One of those is creating deep intuition on demand. What do I mean by that? You know, before my mom passed, I had an agreement with her that I would call her on the telephone every Sunday, wherever I was in the world, and just check in with her. Now, it didn't happen all the time, but it was not uncommon for me to call my mom, and she was already on the phone because she knew I was going to call her. Maybe you've had that happen. You go to pick up the phone to call somebody, and they're already there. And my mom is so funny. She was so funny about this. She'd say, Greg? And I'd say, yeah. She says, well, I was going to call you. And I'd say, well, I'm calling you. And then nobody else is listening. Nobody else can hear, but she would whisper. And she'd say, Greg, I think we've got the ESP. And she didn't want anybody to know about the ESP, extrasensory perception. She thought somebody might give her a hard time if she had the ESP. So when that happens, that is an example of spontaneous intuition. All right? Think of all the things that could have happened. I mean, I could have detoured to get a glass of water before I made that call, and we wouldn't have had that connection. Or my mom could have let the dog out, her dog, to out into the yard. We would miss that connection. Something has to happen in the field for us in those moments to pick up the phone at exactly that instant. That's spontaneous intuition, all right? We've all had that. And then you say, well, that was cool. How can I do that again? Doing it again is intentional intuition. It is deep intuition. In heart-brain coherence, we can awaken deep states of intuition on demand. And we're going to do that in just a few minutes. I'm going to invite you to journey from heart coherence into the field and ask your heart some questions. We're going to do that together. Also, super access to the subconscious. If you do affirmations, an affirmation is you speaking with the subconscious, and you have to speak to the subconscious in a language that it recognizes. When you go into heart-brain coherence, you'll see why. You're bypassing the logic of the brain. You're bypassing the ego and the polarity so you can access that subconscious. So in coherence is where you would want to do your affirmations of healing or relationships or abundance or whatever that is. Super learning, super memory, super cognition. If you're studying for class, I used this when I was in college. If you're trying to memorize a medical text, or I was a geologist, so I had a geology text, crystallography and mineralogy, all the geometry of the crystal systems. You go into the coherence, and then you take in the information. Super learning, super cognition, super memory. And I want you to know there's over 1,300 biochemical reactions, positive biochemical reactions. And in the old days, I used to go through every one of them, and I found my audience doesn't want to do that, so I won't. What I'll say to you is over 1,300 positive biochemical reactions in the body just from doing what we just did. And I've had people say to me, Greg, it can't be that simple. And my response to that is, why would it be any more difficult? Nature is simple. Life is simple until we make it complex. You and I are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology with a very simple user interface. Thought, feeling, emotion, breath, focus, movement, nutrition. That's it. Different combinations of that, we light up this system. And it's an amazing system. If we replace it with synthetics, AI, computer chips, we lose those abilities. That's the whole point of what I'm saying to you here today. So before we go to our next break, I want to go back into this coherent space, but this time we're going to use it differently. We're going to apply it for deep intuition. What do I mean by that? Said earlier today, that the neurons are biological antenna that tune to the field. Literally, and this is a metaphor, they're literally antenna. You saw the scientific paper that said DNA is a fractal antenna. Well, the neurons are biological antenna. They tune to the field. Heart intelligence links us with that field. The field is energy. Energy is information. Everything is in that field. Everything is in that field. Now, I want you to check this out. This is a direct quote from a peer-reviewed scientific journal. So I didn't make this up. Listen to what they're saying. There's compelling evidence to suggest that the physical heart is coupled to a field of information, now listen to this, that is not bound by the classical limits of time and space. What does that mean? That means there's a part of you that is not limited by the laws of physics. The definition of divinity, the ability to transcend perceived limits. There's a part of you that's not limited by the physics that you have been taught to accept. This is why intuition is so powerful. This is why a mother, and this is a story out of the book, a mother in Brisbane, Australia, whose son is stationed in a battlefield halfway around the world in the Middle East. Her son gets into trouble, and the mother calls the son's commanding officer to find out if her son is okay, and the commanding officer doesn't even know yet that her son is in trouble. She knows before the commanding officer with no communication conventionally. How does she know that? Intuition. She's picking it up through the field. Now, I'm going to go off. I didn't even know I was going to talk about this, but ladies, if you're watching this, I want to share this with you. New studies, and I do talk about this in the book a little bit. Researchers just a few years ago made just an astounding discovery. And what they found is, ladies, every time you conceive a new life in your body, in your womb, even if it doesn't go full term, the act of conceiving a new life in your body, that embryo, that fetus, the blood from that baby is circulating through your body, you know that, and your blood is circulating through the body of that fetus. Well, here's what scientists discovered, is that your infant's DNA is in that blood, and it will lodge in certain organs of your body, primarily in the liver. So you will carry the DNA of every child that you've ever conceived in the liver of your body. All right, we already saw earlier that the DNA is a fractal antenna. That means it's communicating with many simultaneous signals. This is why a mother has such a deep intuitive connection with her offspring, with her child, because the DNA in her liver, that is her baby, is communicating with the DNA of that child wherever they are in the world. This is also why it hurts so much. It hurts when a mother loses a child. It hurts when a child loses the mother. It hurts when an adult loses a mother. And I'll tell you, when I lost my mom, I wasn't ready for it. My man brain knew it was going to happen, but there's a part of me that was not emotionally prepared. It's not something you get good at because you don't get much practice. And I was surprised at how much it impacted me. I had grief counseling was very useful in helping me with that. But the mystery is, why does this happen? Now we know there's a scientific reason. The DNA in the mother is in communication with the DNA in the child. It's a two-way communication. As long as one of us is on this earth, we're connected so deeply that the intuition, a mother can tell when her child's in trouble, even if he's a grown man in a battlefield halfway across the earth. That is an advanced, sophisticated technology of communication. And we work that way. I didn't know I was going to talk about that. I don't have the slides, but I think it's interesting that we have that. So beyond the limits of physics, there's a part of us that's not bound by the laws of physics, all right? And that is the very definition of divinity. It's right there on the screen, the ability to transcend perceived limits. If you're not bound by the laws of physics, you are transcending perceived limits. That's your divinity. That's how powerful you are. That's why there's an effort, concerted effort, to replace your biology with technology, because that's where your power comes from. You are much more vulnerable to the ideas and the agendas of other people if you don't have access to your divinity. You're more vulnerable to those ideas because you feel powerless and you live in that fear. All right? So what we're doing is we're celebrating our humanness by embracing the truth of what it means to us. We said that the memory and the information and your divinity lives in the field, all right? So I want you to know that you're never alone when it comes to information. That if something happens to you someday and you find yourself in a place where there's nobody to ask, there's no Google to answer, there's no phone that's working, whatever, and you have to make choices and you have to make decisions, I want you to know you're never alone. And I want you to know why. Because objective answers are in that field. That field has all of the knowledge, all the wisdom. You would call it your higher self. Many people call it, in the spiritual community, call it your higher self. This is intentionally accessing through the heart, the higher self. Objective answers. So why not the brain? Why would you not use the brain? Well, think about this. Think about it with the brain. You know, the brain is a polarity organ. You got a left brain and a right brain. Your left brain is dealing, with logic and math and shapes and numbers, and your right brain is dealing with colors and emotions and feelings. And that's all good. It works together. But here's the thing. If you try to solve a problem and you ask your brain to solve the problem, like a relationship, all right? If you're in a relationship and you're on the fence, should I stay or should I go? There's a song, should I stay or should I go? Yeah, you know that. See, I know some of you know that song. If you ask your brain that question, your brain will make you crazy because it will bounce you back and forth through the left and the right brain. They're called the ego loops because that's what the brain does. It's a polarity organ. So your brain will always have a good and a bad. Your brain's always going to have a right and a wrong. Your brain's always going to have success and failure and worthy of not worthy and sick and healed. That's the brain in polarity. And we need this sometimes, and it's good. But when you're asking, if you want objective questions answered, and you're asking yourself, you want to ask your heart in coherence. And we're going to do this together. Ask your heart in coherence. Why? Because your heart is not a polarity organ. All right? In your heart, you're not going to have a left heart and a right heart, a good and a bad and a right and a wrong. The heart is really fast. When you ask your heart a question, 9 times out of 10, the question's answered before you finish asking. Because the asking is the formalization of a question that's already there. So it's a really fast processor. So in the little time that we have together, what I'd like to do, I want to go through the process so that you have it, and then I'm going to invite you to practice. And I think the most important thing is the trust. Being able to trust the information that comes from your heart. If you're not familiar and if you're not conditioned, you will doubt. And I want you to have this tool because in the next 5 years, between now and the year 2030, you're going to see information given to you in social media. You're going to hear it from friends. You're going to see it come down from higher places, and you're going to say, is this real? Is this true? What should I do? And everybody you ask is going to give you a different answer, or there will be no one to ask because, for whatever reason, that technology won't be there. And I want you to feel empowered. I want you to know that you are never alone. You always have the information that's true and right for you, and you always have. The key is to develop it and trust it. Are you with me on that? Can we do that? All right, so in Coherence, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to invite you to ask your heart a question. How do you do that? I'm going to invite you to begin with the words, my heart. And here's the reason. If you just throw a question out into the universe, there's a lot of energy out there that would love to work through you to give you that answer, and you don't know what that energy is. You don't know what discarnate beings or what, you don't know what's out there. So when you say, my heart, there is no ambiguity. You're directing the answer to the neural network in the heart that's tuned to the field, my heart. I'm going to invite you to be brief, ask in a single sentence, all right? Your heart probably knows you. It's probably been with you most of your life, I think for most of us. So your heart doesn't need a preamble. You don't have to say, well, when I was 5 years old, and I had this experience in your heart knows all that. In a single sentence, ask a question in a way that your heart can answer. Be direct, be concise. We'll do this together. I'm going to lead you through some questions. And be personal. Your heart cannot answer for another person. There are a million factors that go into another person's experience. Past lives, karma. You may not know any of that. You can speculate, but you may not know it. So be personal, all right? That's the ask. When your heart answers, it will be very similar. The answers will be brief, they'll be concise, they'll be direct, they'll be objective, they won't judge. Your heart will never judge you or another person. Non-judgmental, and they will be safe. Your heart will never ask you to do anything that is harmful to you. The beauty of using a process like this rather than a chemical or a drug. A lot of people say, well, Greg, I have these experiences in shamanic ceremonies and all that, and that can all be good. Here's the thing. If you're using a chemical to move you into this space and you have a bad experience, you are stuck until that chemical wears off, until you metabolize it out of your body. If you're in coherence properly, you'll never have a bad experience. If you do have a bad experience, all you do is take a breath, open your eyes, disconnect, and start again. And that's it, because that is how powerful you are. So here's what I'd like to do. These are the techniques. Let's go ahead and take a quick stretch so that you're fresh, and then we're going to come back in, and we're going to go into this, this heart experience, okay? Thank you all for coming back. Welcome back. Hey, I want to thank everyone just for sharing part of your day with me. It was interesting. On my own social media, I kept seeing advertisements for this program. It's always weird when the advertisements come and it's your program you're seeing on the phone. And what I noticed is some people called it a webinar. Some people called it a seminar, and some people called it a master class. I'm not sure exactly what I would call this. My goal, I wanted to put as much information as I could into these 4 60-minute blocks. Some of it is reflected in the book. A lot of what we're doing here is not. The whole concept of heart-brain coherence is an expression, a deep expression of divinity, because it's you empowering yourself. Super memory, super cognition, super intuition, super immune system. Who doesn't want a strong immune system? Super resilience, super longevity. All those are expressions of divinity. They are not possible with synthetics. All right? Synthetics cannot access your divinity. All right? So these techniques are not necessarily shared in the book, but they're supporting the concepts in the book of divinity. So right before the break, we're talking about creating coherence once again and asking our heart questions and receiving those answers from our heart. Brief, direct, concise, objective, non-judgmental. So I'm going to invite you, I'm going to lead you through the same process. Again, it's good to do it after a break, so we're nice and fresh now. 3 steps: shift the focus, shift the breathing, shift the feeling. And once we settle into that space, we're no longer in the thinking brain, so the left and the right brain. You're in the objectivity of the heart. And that's really important. I will lead you through a series of questions. I'm going to invite you to ask your heart questions, and I'll help you with that. But I know many of you are facing challenges in your life right now. The universe has brought a challenge to your doorstep. And I'm going to invite you to have a question in mind that you'd like to ask your heart. Maybe it's about a relationship, should I stay, should I go? Or maybe it's about a job, should I stay, should I go? Maybe it's about where you live. Maybe it's about a health issue in your own body. And everybody's giving you different ideas. Your healthcare providers have their ideas, your friends have their ideas, your parents have their ideas, your partner has their ideas, and you're left reeling like, what should I do? Ask your heart, not your brain, but ask your heart. Your heart, your brain in coherence. Now I'm just reminding you, think about what's happening here. Your heart and your brain in coherence are accessing a field of information that is not limited by the laws of physics, not limited by time and space. And when you receive that information, you don't have to act on it. I don't want you to be afraid to receive, but allow it to inform you. Allow and see how it feels. See how it feels, okay? So we'll do this, and then we'll do just a couple of questions right after that, and then we've got a big, big block that I want to round out the day with. And I'm hoping you stay for this last session as well. If you've never seen it before, it's kind of a mind blower. 20 years of original research leading to a message encoded within the DNA of your body. And that's the message that empowers you to embrace your own divinity and why it is. When you say, who am I? What gives me the right to embrace my own divinity in this world? The message in your DNA was put there just for that reason, to remind you. So we've got a big last session here, and I'll do my very best to get through it as efficiently, professionally, responsibly as possible. But I want to honor you. I want to honor you with this information, all right? So I think most people are back. I'm seeing most the seats are filled again now. So here we go. I'm going to invite you one more time. It's my favorite slide. Let's do it. Let's do it. You won't need pencils, papers, pens, phones. I invite you to put those all aside. Sage AV team, if we can go ahead. Thank you. Bring that audio up again, please. We've covered a lot of ground. You gave me permission early this morning. You said I could go deep and I could go fast. So I took you up on that. Thank you. I see people reorganizing, rearranging here. I'm going to invite you once again to close your eyes. Unless you're driving. Don't do this if you're driving. All right? Close your eyes. And just allow your awareness once again to move from your thinking mind to your feeling heart. That first step, I'm going to invite you to touch your heart center gently in a way that's comfortable for you. It's comfortable for you. Whatever that means. Maybe it's a full palm over your heart. Maybe you're accustomed to the mudra of both hands in prayer position, nestled into that space right in the center of your chest. It's the sensation of the touch on your body that draws your awareness into your heart. And that's what's important. Okay? First step, allow your awareness to move to your heart. Second step, once again, we're going to slow our breathing. It's a little bit slower than usual. I live at high elevation, about 7,000 feet above sea level. So my breathing may be a little bit different than yours, whatever's comfortable for you. But once again, I'm going to do the ratio. 4 counts on the inhale, 6 counts on the release. Whatever's comfortable for you, just release longer than the inhale. With your focus on your heart, I invite you to breathe as if your breath is coming from your heart. The first breath, inhale, begin. And release. Just feel that shift. Inhale. Release. Just settle into that space. Inhale again. And release. Just feel that. Feel that shift. Inhale. And release. And to the best of your ability, continue breathing just about that pace, a little bit slower than usual. As if the breath is coming from your heart, while your awareness is focused in your heart. Second step. Okay, and the third step, once again, I'm going to invite you to feel a feeling because you choose to feel the feeling. The feeling of gratitude, or appreciation, or care, or compassion. For most people, gratitude is the easiest to access. I'll leave that to you. A positive emotion. Feel the feeling as if it's coming from your heart. While you focus on your heart and you breathe a little slower. And this is your user interface to your divinity. You're creating a space. No other form of life can do this. And into this space of objectivity without judgment, without the polarities, I would invite you to ask a series of questions, and I will lead you through the questions. The first question, silently to yourself, begin with the words, my heart. My heart, what do you want me to know right now? My heart, what do you want me to know right now? The key is to allow the answer to come to you. Don't chase the answer. Just be present, be silent, be still, and allow the answer to come to you in whatever way it does. Maybe it's a picture, maybe it's an image, maybe it's a sound, maybe it's a word or a brief phrase. My heart. My heart, what do you want me to know right now? All right, whatever that answer is, take a breath and anchor the answer so you can call it to you at another time. Inhale, and just anchor the answer so you can call it to you. Second question. My heart, what do you need from me right now? My heart, what do you need from me right now? Just allow that answer to come to you. Whatever that is. There'll be a single word, a brief phrase, maybe an image in your mind. Should feel familiar, yet new, a new piece of information in a familiar format. Okay, whatever that answer is, it usually comes quickly. One breath, inhale, and anchor that answer on the release. Inhale, and release. We all come to this world for a healing of some kind. And although there are many kinds of healing that are possible, they generally stem from a common belief about ourselves, our past, our relationship to our bodies and the world. They stem from a wound that we encounter early in our lives, or maybe carry through our families as a wound from another lifetime. That ancient wound is key in our healing. Third question, my heart. My heart. My heart, what is the ancient wound within me that is asking for a deeper healing right now? My heart. What is the ancient wound that I carry that is asking for a deeper healing right now? Just allow the answer to come to you. Don't chase that answer. If it's a picture, an image, a word, a feeling, be present without judgment. Just allow the answer to be present. Whatever that answer is, I'm going to invite you to give your ancient wound a name. Give it a name so that you can call it to you in a few minutes for a deeper healing. Give your wound a name so that you can call it to you in a few moments for a deeper healing. Okay. The last question, while we're in this space that we've created for ourselves, this field, this path to a space that is not limited by the laws of physics. I'm going to invite you to ask your personal question. Begin with the words, my heart. And then ask the question in a way that your heart can answer in a single sentence or a brief phrase. My heart. And ask your question. I'll give you just a moment to do that. Just be present with whatever that answer is. Whether it's about personal healing, personal relationships, your place in the world, the changes of the world. Okay? Whatever the answer is that's coming to you, just allow it to be present without judging it. You might be surprised. You might say, no way. Just allow the answer to come to you. All right? And with one more breath, I'm going to invite you to inhale. I'm doing the same. Release that breath. Whew. Anchor those answers. Breathe again. Inhale. And as you release that breath, gently begin to open your eyes, become present in this space. Sage team, if you'd please fade our music. Appreciate that. How many of you found that it was easier to go back into the coherence the second time? it easier? Yeah, a lot of people saying yes. When you ask your heart what your heart wanted you to know, my heart, what do you want me to know right now? How many of you got an answer about healing, becoming a healing, expressing healing in your life? Anybody? Okay, a few. Is there another one? How many got something about trust? Anybody? Okay, I'm seeing hands with trust. How many received an answer about compassion? Anybody about compassion? Okay, I'm seeing a few of those. These are heart-based answers. These are the kinds of answers that come to you. Often a single word or a brief phrase. And I'm not surprised if we're in the field together, if we were all in one big room together, we'd be sharing that heart field. But we're spread across the earth, connected through the field, and we're still sharing that field. All right? My heart, what do you want me to know? My heart, what do you need from me? How many got something like love? Anybody get love from your heart? My heart, okay, we're seeing that. What about understanding? What about trust? What about rest? I'm seeing that, rest. Okay, these are heart-based answers, usually just a word or maybe a brief phrase that comes to you. The ancient wound, was anyone surprised by what came to them from that? I'm seeing some people nod their heads. We're going to work with that again here in just a moment, all right? So I wanted to have this exercise under our belts. In the brief time we're together, you now have done coherence twice. You know the 3 steps. You know about the breathing. The key is to release for a longer period than you inhale. Triggers the parasympathetic nervous system. I'm going to invite you to use this technique, if you don't already, at least once a day. At least once a day. All right, for a minimum of 3 minutes. What the researchers have found at HeartMath, 3 minutes of coherence increases the DHEA level in the body over 100%. Only 3 minutes. Why is that important? DHEA is the precursor to every other hormone in your body. Testosterone, you want more testosterone? You need more DHEA. Estrogen, you need more DHEA. Progesterone, you need more DHEA. Even melatonin. So you increase without changing diet, exercise, anything, just from 3 minutes of coherence. You increase DHE levels over 100%. You decrease cortisol, stress hormone, over 23%, and it lasts up to 6 hours, unless something happens. You know, if something big happens in your world to disrupt everything, it lasts over 6 hours just from 3 minutes. I typically do it, as I said, before I sleep at night, so that I'm healing and regenerating in the sleep. So I want you to have this tool, this technique. In longer programs, if you're with me in a live event, this is where we will do affirmations. We'll build our own affirmations because there's a structure, there's a formula for affirmations that looks just like a computer code that you would use to program a computer today. And you would do your affirmations in this space because you've got a hotline to the subconscious. You've got to speak to the subconscious in a language that it recognizes. Coherence gives you a hotline to the subconscious, okay? That's why we did everything that we just did. All right? I've got another piece that I want to share with you. Actually, can we go back? I promised I'd do a couple of questions. Can we put those questions back up on the screen again, please? That we had. Okay, we started over 3 hours ago, and I invited you to ask a couple of questions that go all the way back to the very beginning. The very beginning this morning, we talked about this fundamental struggle between the light and dark, good and evil. And the question is, what is the goal for evil to divide us and instill fear at the end of the day? So I think they're saying, ultimately, what is the goal? And we've answered that question. We've talked about that. The goal is to deny us our divinity. The goal of evil is to deny us our divinity because it's through our divinity that we find our power. Through our divinity, we transcend fear. Through our divinity, we transcend hate. The goal of evil is to create fear, to create hate, to break the social bonds that hold us together, to divide us so that we are vulnerable to the ideas and the agendas, and there are a bunch of ideas and agendas out there. One of those ideas, one of those agendas we talked about this morning. There is a concerted effort to use technology to merge humans, biology, the world out there, and our digital world into one big database. What does that mean? Literally, it means digitizing, and we can do this now, we have the technology, digitizing all the fish in the oceans, all the trees, all the resources, all the water, okay, and all of us. And the only way to have a digital representation of us is to put technology inside of our bodies, in RFID chips. We're talking about nano sensors that are constantly reporting and feeding into the network that is now being created. Skylink is part of that. Skylink will cover every nano fraction of the earth will be part of that field. And it's one of the places that we talked about this morning. The technology can be used for really good things, or it can be used for things that are not so good for us. So the idea is to blend us into this digital world running under AI that Ray Kurzweil, his book, if you want to read more about it, his book is released in 2024 called The Singularity. The UN is calling this UN SDG 2030, Sustainable Goals 2030. They're beautiful goals on the outside when you read them. They're beautiful goals of reducing poverty and reducing disease. Beautiful. Now you look at the fine print. How are they going to achieve those goals? That is what becomes very concerning. My goal is to give you reasons to appreciate your humanness and to understand your human capacities. And we're not done. I've got a big piece I'm going to share with you here. And this is why we're doing all the things we're doing. Divinity ultimately is the key to that. Here's a question. When using heart-brain coherence, can it help us heal conditions inside of our bodies? I'm going to answer it this way. I'm not a medical doctor. I have to say that as a disclaimer. I'm a scientist. I'm a researcher. And I've learned how to read research papers. And here's what the papers tell us. Every organ in the human body is now documented with the ability to stop the disease that it may be expressing, stop it, number one. Number two, to heal the damage that's already occurred. And number three, to reverse that damage and even rejuvenate, including telomeres on the tips of the DNA, all the way down to the molecular level. Every organ, every gland, every system in the body, even the ones we were told could not, heart tissue, brain tissue, spinal cord tissue, pancreatic tissue, all documented, healing, reversing a disease, and regenerating. But there's a catch. And the catch is this. The tissues need to be given the environment that allows them to do what the body knows how to do. What does that mean? Environment can be the air and the water. Sure, that's important. Nutrition, that's important. Here's the good news, the beautiful news, is the most powerful environment that we bathe ourselves in is the emotional environment that we create. Now, that means there's a responsibility that comes with that, and a lot of people don't like that. It's frightening because they've never been told who they are. They've never been taught how powerful they are, that they are literally a soft technology with the ability to self-regulate their own biology in a way that no other form of life is. If you don't know that, then it's scary to think that you have that responsibility. But if you do know that, and the next piece is where we're going to go with this, and you trust that ability, it opens the door to beautiful, beautiful and powerful things. So what is the most powerful environment? It is the emotional environment that you bathe your cells in every day. If you watch television, every commercial is hosted by a company that is telling you that something's wrong with you and that they have the way to fix that. Our young people in schools today are being taught that carbon-based life, which is us, is flawed from the very beginning, and that they need something outside of themselves to be the best version of themselves and to compete in life. They're being told they need something outside of themselves. And of course, that something is technology. So young people are grasping at the technology to bring into their bodies to fix what they believe is a broken system. All right? So, can heart-brain coherence help with that? That coherence is a very powerful and healing environment. Once you drop into the coherence, now you have the image of your body fully healed, fully enabled, fully capacitated. This is where you bathe yourself in love, because the body responds to love. It responds to gratitude. It responds to compassion in this space. Key is do it in coherence, because if you do it in the mind, you've got the brain. How do I know this works? You know, who told me to do this? Well, one teacher tells me to meditate this way, another teacher. Your brain does all that polarity stuff. That's the ego. Go into the heart in coherence. Love yourself. Yes, love will heal your body. And I'm going to, last question, how can you improve HRV if it's low? What is it telling you, and how can you increase it? I answered that this morning. There's a formula, very quick formula. Goes left to right. The greater the heart-brain coherence, the greater the heart rate variability, the greater the resilience to change. You want to increase heart rate variability? Increase heart-brain coherence. Go to the Institute of Heart Math website. You can see the scientific papers, HEART, capital MATH, all one word, .org. Go to the website, click on the research papers. It's all peer-reviewed right there. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff, published in places like New England Journal of Medicine and Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine. All those papers are there. Those are good questions. Thank you, Hay House question conveyors. I'm going to move right back into our program in the time we have left. And I want to share something with you. It's so powerful. It's so beautiful. It's so exciting. Divinity. I said this morning, it begins the way you think of yourself, the way we all think of ourselves. If you see yourself as flawed, how can your body perform? How can your body do what it knows how to do? If you're holding the image, that feeling creates chemistry in the body that matches the feeling. If you don't trust your body, then how can your body kick in and do what it knows it needs how to do? We are truly highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology, and the question comes, where did it come from? Who or what is responsible for our humanness? Who or what gave us the ability to link to divinity in the way that the ancient gods were said to do? These are truly God-like capabilities that we are given. The ability to heal, the ability to remote view, to see distance, to the ability to empathize with another being, to feel what that being is feeling. Those are truly God-like abilities, God-like capabilities. Well, is it possible that we carry within us a message from who or whatever it is that's responsible for us having these abilities? Well, the answer is yes. It is chapter 2 of the book that you have. And I want to tell you, when I wrote the chapter, I hesitated because some of it is technical, but I wanted you to have it. So if you start reading the chapter, there's a place in the book, and it literally says, if you want the details, continue. If you don't, skip ahead, and it will tell you how far to skip ahead to get the benefit without going through the details, okay? So let's start at the very beginning. Is it possible that we carry a message in our DNA? Well, how can you even carry a message in DNA? I mean, that, what is it, like a written something, you know, inside the cells? 2007, Japanese scientists released a paper, peer-reviewed paper. I'm going to get close. It was in the journal American Chemical Society is where it was. And the title tells the whole thing. Storing Digital Data in Living Organisms is the title of the paper. Now think about that. Storing digital data in organisms. So the bottom line, here's what happened. Japanese scientists were able to encode information into the DNA of certain bacteria. They allowed the bacteria to live hundreds of generations, which doesn't take long if you're a bacteria. And then they pulled the data out of the bacteria after hundreds of generations, and the data was there. It was intact. They could read it like the day they put it in there, proving that digital information can be stored in a living organism, in the DNA, all right? Now, here's the kicker, and this is what the reason they published it in this journal, is because the DNA is actually a better storage mechanism than the flash drive of your computer. DNA is 1,000 times more dense for storage than flash memory. And if you think about it, it makes sense because DNA is three-dimensional. So you've got three-dimensional storage rather than two-dimensional array in flash storage. So the DNA is 1,000 times better. Now look at this. You can write information into the DNA of any life form and store it forever. As long as that species, as long as one member of that species still exists, that information will last forever. This now is so real. Everybody is writing into DNA right now. The entire Library of Congress of the United States, all the books categorized or cataloged under the Library of Congress are now stored in bacteria in the DNA with a special computer. If something bad happens, all right, if an asteroid hits the Earth or we got a nuclear war or whatever it is and everything's lost, as long as there's one special computer and one bacteria, and there's a lot of them that are stored, we will always have the ability to retrieve that information and start over. That's how powerful this is. So this isn't like some metaphor. It's not some peripheral thing. This is real. Scientists and now corporations are storing information in DNA. All right, and the DNA is in all kinds of organisms. When I began to understand this, my question is simply this. A long, long time ago, did this happen to us? If we are the product of an intentional act, and I referred to this earlier, that we're not the product of random mutations. I'm a geologist. I'm going to be really clear. I believe in evolution. I've seen it in the fossil record. I saw it in my field work, plants, insects, animals. The theory breaks down when it comes to humans because something happened to us 200,000 years ago, 10,000 generations ago. And that something sets us apart from all other forms of life. We are not the product of random mutations happening slowly over a long period of time. 200,000 years ago, we showed up the way we are today, and we compare our DNA to the DNA pulled out of the fossils from our ancestors. We haven't changed. The DNA, same genome. All right? So if we are the product of an intentional act, is it possible that who or whatever is responsible for us would have left a mark, would have left a signature? You know, I know many of you are artists. And as an artist, what's the last thing you do? When you create something that you're proud of, the last thing that you do to your painting or the last thing you do to your sculptures, you sign it. You put your name on it because you're proud of it. I would hope that who or whatever is responsible for us is proud of us as a creation and has left a signature, all right? And that signature exists. It's in the DNA of every cell of your body. Let's decode this together, and this is a very high level. I'm going to do this very quickly. You see it all in chapter 2 in the book if you want more information. What I'm going to say is you've got to think differently about your cells. We've already thought of cells from a perspective of information technology, IT. Well, now we're going to think of it even on a more different level. Think of the cell. What if every one of those 50 trillion cells in your body, those sticky, wet, gooey, mushy things, what if every cell literally is a library? That's a way different way of thinking. What do you find in a library? You go to a library and you find books. What if every chromosome inside of your cells is a book. And those chromosomes are made of smaller segments of DNA called genes. What if every one of those genes are paragraphs and sentences and words? Well, that's exactly what's happening. Now, I didn't go into a lot of detail with this in the book. I began exploring this in 1986. We didn't have desktop computers. We didn't have the genome like we have right now. My job as a senior computer systems designer was a special area of programming called pattern recognition software. The first time I saw human DNA, the human genome, I recognized it wasn't random. There were patterns in the DNA. And that sent me on a journey to find what the information says. To complete that journey, I had to do something that scientists typically don't do. I lost a lot of credibility for doing this. I crossed the traditional boundaries that separate many of the sciences. I crossed the traditional boundaries between chemistry and genetics and biology and linguistics and ancient languages. And I went to a 3,000-year-old text that had the exact instructions for how humankind was created. And I looked at those instructions that are ancient, and I interpreted them through the lens of the modern world, through the lens of the periodic table of elements, and through the lens of DNA and chemistry. We're going to do this together right now. I'm going to do it quickly at a very high level. I don't want to get bogged down in the information. I want us to go to the result. If you want a lot of the details, they're in chapter 2 of the book that you hold in your hand, all right? So let's do this. How would we decode the message in our DNA? Well, first of all, DNA is made of 4 chemical bases. You've all seen these on science fiction programs. It's adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. And you typically see them abbreviated by the first letter, A, T, C, G. And you see this stuff come up in science fiction programs, all the time. You see, DNA code flashing on the screen. There was even a movie called Gattaca, Gattaca. Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke starred in the movie. It was about a very special genetic code. It's your homework. If you haven't seen it, check out the movie Gattaca. Not now, but after this is finished. All right, so all of our DNA is only made from those 4 chemical bases. What does that mean? Well, let's take a look at this. Thiamine, it's going to look like biology 101 just for a second here. Bear with me. Thiamine is made of 4 elements: hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon. That's it. All right, guanine, same thing. Hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon. You see a pattern here. We're going somewhere with this. Cytosine, same thing. Hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon. Adenine, same thing. But here's the key. The number of atoms of hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon is different for every one of those. Check this out. So here for hydrogen, for thiamine, you've got 6 hydrogens, all right? Guanine, you've only got 5. Thiamine, you've got 2 nitrogens. Guanine, you've got 5 nitrogens. And so you can see this is what sets these apart. There's different amounts of the elements, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, in each of those, okay? Good with that so far? Give me a thumbs up, a thumbs down. Does it make sense? Yes, no? I don't want to lose you. I love you guys. I love you guys so much because you're hanging in there and you're living in a world that's changing and you're making the difference, and we need you and we need your divinity. So thank you for the thumbs up. All right, so all life, all carbon-based life, including you and me, were made of that stuff on your screen right there. So now let's look at it on the periodic table of elements. It's what your kids do in school. It's what you probably did in school, and here it is. I've highlighted these in green: hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon. All right? Now, there are a lot of ways to represent the words. Hydrogen is a word I'm using, but there's a lot of numbers that will represent hydrogen. There's atomic weight, atomic mass, valence, electron spin, all kinds of things, melting point. All right? Put that on hold just for a minute. Kind of take the idea, those elements, set them over here, shift gears, because we're multitasking brains. We can do this. Let's talk about ancient languages. There are 4 root writing systems that are the foundation for the ancient languages that we study today. One of those is called cuneiform. It's not an alphabet. It's actually a writing system. Interestingly, from cuneiform, Sanskrit is derived as well as Arabic and Hebrew. All right, these are four ancient, they're called root or core writing systems. Now, this is important. The reason I'm saying this to you, we're going to decode a message in the DNA of every human on the face of this earth. That message is so universal that you can translate it, you can decode it into any one of these languages. You can decode it in Arabic, you can decode it in Hebrew, in Sanskrit, in cuneiform, and other ancient languages, but these are the four core languages. It's so universal that it works, it reads exactly the same in every one of these languages. Now, in this course, for brevity, I'm going to use Hebrew. Many of you have studied Kabbalah, and you know Kabbalah, you know about numbers and letters in Kabbalah. If I were in Cairo doing this, I would do it in Arabic, same thing, all right? So I just want to be really clear about that. When you study ancient alphabets, linguistics, there's something very interesting. Every ancient alphabet has always had a mysterious number that goes with every letter in the alphabet. Nobody knows where they came from. They never change. They've always been there. And the science of studying those is called gematria or gematria. I've heard it both ways. I want to be clear, this is not numerology. Numerology is a loose, unstructured subset. Gematria is a science that is governed by 32 rabbinical rules that were laid down in the 2nd century CE, Common Era, 2nd century AD, if you're still doing that. 32 rules, and if you follow those rules tell us what we can do with those numbers, all right? So here is what I did. I took the modern way of looking at life on the periodic table, and I took the ancient way of looking at life in the ancient languages, and I said, what if they're both saying the same thing? What is the common link between the old way and the new way of looking? This is what took me so long. This is original research. I had to shift my thinking. Very different from what I was trained to do as a scientist, very different from my upbringing in the Midwest as a child. Nobody taught me to think this way, and took me almost 20 years to do this. Looking back, it was easy. I was kind of a slow learner because I was stuck in my own illusion of the boundaries between the sciences. So I had to cross the boundary between linguistics and these languages and chemistry and genetics. I'm not a geneticist. I had to do a crash course and learn genetics and DNA. All right, and mathematics and the periodic table, all of these things. Well, the bottom line is this. Let me give you a couple of examples. Here's the Hebrew alphabet. There's the letters. There's the numbers that go with it. There's the Arabic alphabet. There's the letters. There's the numbers that go with it. We could do the same thing, Sanskrit and cuneiform. All right? So every letter has a number that represents it. So here's the key, and this is what took me so long. The numbers that represent the ancient alphabets correlate with the numbers that represent the elements in our bodies. Let's say it again. The number that represents the ancient letters correlates with the number for the DNA, the hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon in our bodies. What does that mean? It means that the letters of the alphabets and the DNA are interchangeable. The letters of the alphabets and the elements of the DNA are interchangeable because they're linked by a number. All right, that's the key to what we're doing here. So if that makes sense, let's do it. Let's do this. Only one number of the elements allows us to link it to the alphabets, and that is atomic mass. Atomic mass is the number. If we find the number that represents atomic mass for hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, then that number will link us to the letters in the ancient alphabets. Now we can take the letters of the alphabets and plug them into the strand of DNA, and you literally can read this like you read the letters on the page of a book. And you and I are going to do that right now. Right now. So all I'm doing, I'm saying that these two information systems are equal. I'm not judging one as ancient and primitive and the other one as modern. All right? So if I apply the rules of gematria, ancient gematria, to the modern periodic table, those rules say that I can reduce the numbers on the periodic table to anything between 1 and 9. They're called the Pythagorean numbers, is what some people refer to these as. So let's do this together. You guys, and you know what? I'm gonna be very studious. I'm gonna put my glasses on just for a minute. I didn't wear them earlier because there's a reflection in the glass here. So let's do this. Hydrogen is 1.0 is the atomic mass. You're seeing it right there on the screen. The rules of gematria say we can reduce that to a single number. So what is 1 plus the 0? You guys tell me. You're absolutely right. It's 1. So here it is right there. Hydrogen becomes a 1. 1 plus 0 is 1. Let's go over here to nitrogen. Nitrogen is 14.0. If you apply the rules and reduce, that becomes a 5. You guys are awesome. Oxygen, 15.9. You apply the rules of gematria, and all of a sudden the oxygen becomes a 6. Carbon, 12.0. You apply the rules, carbon becomes a 3. Now we've got something really interesting, because we've applied the rules of the ancient writing systems to the modern periodic table, and we can apply the periodic table rules to the ancient writing systems. We're calling them equal. Now let's build a chart. Scientists like charts. So here it is. And I know I'm moving quickly because I don't want to get bogged down. I want to get to what this means. Here on the left is the elements of DNA: hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon. The atomic mass reduced to the single digit, 1, 5, 6, and 3. All right, so now let's take that. Here it is right here. No mystery. That's exactly where that came from. So you can do this on a napkin for your family at the next dinner table, and they will be impressed, okay? Or, I don't know, maybe think you're crazy. I don't know. But you'll have fun doing it. All right, now, as I said, the DNA code, it works in all these alphabets. Let's take a look at Hebrew. Here we go with Hebrew. What letters in the Hebrew alphabet correspond with 1, 5, 6, and 3 using the 32 rabbinical rules of gematria? And what we find, there's a number, 1, 5, 6, and 3. And if you know Hebrew, you're going to see something happen here really quick. What we find is hydrogen becomes a Y, nitrogen becomes an H, oxygen becomes a V, a Vav, carbon becomes a G, a Gimel. All right, and there's exactly how it happened by applying those rabbinical rules. We're following the rules. Now, if you take that chart and you go back to the stuff we're made of, let's take cytosine, for example. Here's cytosine. It's made of hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon. 5 hydrogens, and I've actually spelled them out there in a vertical column. 3 nitrogens, 1 oxygen, 4 carbons. You can see it right there. And now the little chart tells us that for every one of those elements, we can put a letter in there because of the link. All right? So when we put those letters in there, every hydrogen becomes a Y, every nitrogen becomes an H, oxygen becomes a V, every carbon becomes a G, a Gimel. So no mystery. I want you to see exactly, no hocus pocus. There's where it comes from right there. You put that back into the strand of DNA, and what you have, YHVG, YH, YH. All right, and you can see exactly where that comes from. If you know Hebrew, you're already seeing it happen right here. Once again, we could do this in Arabic, Sanskrit, cuneiform. What does this mean? All right, the information in our DNA is in layers, just like a book is in layers. When you open that book that you have, you'll see a preface, and then you'll see an introduction, and then you'll see chapter 1. The information ourselves is the same way. What we're decoding right now, we're translating, is the first layer. It's the introduction to the rest of the information in your cell. It's brief, it is concise, it's potent. That first layer, introducing the message in our cells, it literally translates as 2 words, YHVG. And I think most of you know the Hebrew language. Biblical Hebrew does not use vowels. It's a consonant-based language. The vowels are implied, and there are entire texts that tell you what vowels are used and where they're used. So we're looking at the consonants, 2 words, YHVG. What does this mean? All right, you with me? You guys good so far? Yeah? No? Okay, here we go. And we are going to run over just a few minutes, probably 15 minutes we're going to run over. All right? The translation, YH, literally translates into the words God or eternal. So in your cells, you literally have the words God, eternal. Where is God eternal? That's the next word. VH literally translates within the body. What is the introduction to the message that was left to you 200,000 years ago, 10,000 generations ago in the cells of your body? Who are you? What gives you the right to embrace your divinity in this world? Because you are literally God eternal within the body. It doesn't say that you are the God. It says that you are a powerful being, God eternal within the body. That's for cytosine. Now, what we're looking at, here it is, God eternal within the body, God eternal, God eternal. You can see it in red. What about the next guanine? God eternal within the body, God eternal, God eternal, God eternal, God eternal. What about thiamine? God eternal within the body, God eternal within the body. Adenine, God eternal, God eternal, God eternal, God eternal, God eternal. You literally are made of different combinations of God eternal within the body, expressed through the elements that this world is made of. God eternal within the body, the first layer, the message in the DNA. Now, the first time that I saw this, I was working this out by hand. We didn't have the computers. I was on a legal pad. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And the first thing that came across my mind, I said, is this a fluke? Is this by chance? And I called a statistician friend of mine at 3 in the morning who was happy to work with me. And he ran the numbers. The odds that this is a fluke, that this is just by chance, 0.00042%, or 1 in 234,256, implying that this appears to be intentional. This message is an intentional message. These are the odds of the DNA forming a meaningful 4-letter word from the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. We have a message within our bodies. Now, I mentioned this morning, and I did it because I knew we would have this conversation right now. All of those places that I've been to in the past, the amazing monasteries and the nunneries and the temples and ancient temples, they were always built in layers from the outside in. And the innermost part of the temple is where the deepest mysteries were held. The greatest wisdom and the greatest secrets were always held in the innermost sanctum of the temple. And it had a name, and the name of that place was called the Holy of Holies. You hear this in Solomon's temple, in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount, where the Ark of the Covenant was stored, was literally inside the Holy of Holies. Well, you also see, almost universally, whether you're talking about Arabic or Hebrew or Sanskrit, they say that our bodies literally are a temple. They call us a temple. And you all have probably heard this before. And if you are biblically inclined, you can actually read this, King James Version of the Christian Bible. Literally, 1 Corinthians 3:16, I think it is. 1 Corinthians 3:16 says, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells within ye." So that's biblical. You may not identify with this. If you do, I want you to know those words are actually there. Well, what does this mean? If we are a temple, do we have a holy of holies within us? Well, we have not one, but we have in the body temple 50 trillion holy of holies, because the nucleus of every cell holds the message that tells you who you are. You're God eternal within the body. God eternal within the body. And the message is exactly the same, no matter what gender you identify with, no matter what your sex, no matter what color of your skin, no matter what your religion. If you are a human, a pure human, you are God eternal within the body. And when we replace our biology with synthetics and technology, we lose that message. And you lose it in one generation, and the next generation begins to forget, and pretty soon we have a species that is lost and has no idea who we are. Our technology is valuable to use outside of our bodies. There's something so ancient and powerful and sacred and precious about this soft technology, this temple. And you need look no further. When you forget who you are, you need look no further than the 50 trillion cells that you carry in your body across this earth with every step you take. You are God eternal within the body. God eternal within the body, and it's the same for everyone. So what does that mean? What does that mean for us? It might take a while for this to sink in. I know it's a lot of information in a brief period of time. That's why I wrote the book. In 2004, I released another book called The God Code. The whole book is about this message. That was the year that I published, so it's 21 years ago. Actually, it was my first book with Hay House. My first Hay House book is called The God Code, and the entire book is about this message. Chapter 2 in the book that you have details this message. What does it mean? We've covered a lot of ground today. A lot of ground. And what I want to do is we close this part of the program out. I'd like us once again to close our eyes to really embody the power of this message. We're talking about human divinity, what gives us the right to express godlike powers of love and forgiveness in this world. What gives us the right is that we are God eternal within the body. And those that want to replace our bodies with synthetics, when they do that, they deny us access to our divinity. And I want you to think about that. I want you to consider it, not judge it, not be angry about it, but just know we're on the verge of giving away our humanness to technology before we even know fully what it means to be human. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes one last time. Close your eyes. Just gently touch your heart center to communicate with the power of our hearts. We don't have to do the full coherence. I'm inviting you to be in your heart just for this message. 200,000 years ago, the first of our kind emerged mysteriously, appeared on this earth, and our ancient ancestor was given the gift that set them apart from all other forms of life. And we know that gift today is the gift of biology, DNA. The biology and the DNA that gave them godlike powers. And those powers, they're with us today. They're still locked into the genetic code. It gives us human life, and it gives us human divinity. Something that was given to no other form of life. 10,000 generations ago, our ancestors were deceived into surrendering their divinity to the power of fear. And there are all kinds of books and texts that describe how that happened and why it happened. The point is that our divinity is still with us today. 10,000 generations later, we stand today at the crossroads. Once again, we're being asked to surrender our divinity to technology, of surrendering our bodies, our very humanness, the vessel that carries our divinity. We're the generation that will choose whether or not we are the last generation of pure humans that this world will ever know. The last generation to access our divinity in the way that we were given so long ago. To reclaim our divinity, we're invited to embrace our humanness. We cannot separate the two and accept the power and the responsibility that comes through our human divinity. And it's this message in ourselves that reminds us of our heritage and our purpose and even our destiny. Our destiny to live our humanness to the fullest extent. To love this world into peace. To love this world into peace. We are God eternal within the body. And that's what gives us that right. So now I'm going to ask you a couple of questions as we close this part of our program today. Once again, as you touch your heart, I invite you to say the words, my heart. My heart, do I love myself enough to accept the message that I carry in my body? My heart, do I love myself enough to live the truth of my divinity in a world that doesn't always support that truth? That's where the workshop begins. To live your truth, the best version of yourself, to love fearlessly, to forgive without expectation, to imagine, to innovate, to create, to share in a world that sometimes denies those abilities. Do you love yourself enough to live that in your everyday life? My heart. My heart, what is that ancient wound that I carry in this lifetime that's asking for a greater healing? What is the wound that I've given my power away to in exchange to conform in this world, to feel safe and to be successful? You gave that wound a name earlier. Now I'm going to invite you to call that wound to you, whatever name you gave it. I'm going to ask, how do you now meet your ancient wound, not as a fearful human, but as God eternal within the body? How do you meet the wound of your sense of worth, of your sense of healing, of your ability to love and forgive, or the feeling that all of that has been denied? How do you meet that? Through the power of God eternal within the body. Whatever that answer is, allow it to come to you. This is one of those beautiful places where science, spirituality, real world events all merge into a single knowing. Sage AV, would you go ahead and fade our music, please? I'm going to invite you now to take one more breath if you haven't already. Inhale. And as you release that breath, gently begin to open your eyes. I wish you could see all the God eternals within the body that I'm looking at here. Because you look beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. I know we've covered a lot of ground. I know some of it's new and some of it is very familiar. I know some of it is a very different way of thinking. And I invited you this morning to put it all into a file folder in your mind called possibilities, because that makes it safe to explore anything, just a possibility. My sense is that through this year and in the next 5 years, you and I are going to see the attempts to remake this world, and they can't do it unless they remake our bodies. My hope, my goal was to give you a deeper sense of appreciation for the gift of your body in this world, and once again, maybe even a sense of pride. I'm immensely proud to walk as a human on this earth. I believe that we're valuable. I believe we're worth preserving. I believe that pure humans are worth preserving. Through our divinity, we triumph in the ancient struggle between good and evil. Remember, the goal of evil is to deny our divinity. So without fighting back, by simply moving forward and living the best version of ourselves in all the ways that we've talked about, loving fearlessly, forgiving without expectation, empathizing with our brothers and sisters who are having a really hard time in the world right now, sympathize, compassion. The healing of your own body is only possible as you accept your own personal divinity. It's through accepting those abilities that we triumph. We don't win, we triumph in this battle between good and evil. I think probably our highest form of mastery is to protect the vessel that holds the message, God eternal within the body. Our highest mastery to preserve and protect this vessel. And I want you to think back to this day and think back to this book and the time we've shared together. When the marketing campaigns coerce you and indoctrinate you and persuade you and lure you into replacing the gift of your humanness with that technology, I'm not going to tell you it's right, wrong, good, or bad. I just want you to know what it means, and I want you to know what the consequences are of doing that. Through our divinity, we triumph in the struggle between good and evil. My goal in this day was to awaken a confidence within you to accept the invitation. What invitation is that? It's your invitation. You're standing at the precipice of a doorway. That door is opening in front of you to step into the world that's emerging as the best version of yourself. That means something has to change in your life. That means that you have to think differently about yourself in the presence of the world that's emerging, not the world that has been. That's my goal. In the 4 hours that we've spent together, my prayer is that that door is opened, and I'm going to welcome you to whatever new world you have based on what we have done in this brief time together, whatever new understandings, whatever deeper appreciation you have for yourself. Welcome to the new world in here, because that is where the world out there is going to come from, the way we think of ourselves. I want to thank you all for spending part of your day with me today. And I'm going to invite you to thank whoever you share your life with for sharing you with us for these 4 hours as a big part of your day today. Thank you for supporting Hay House and all the ways you do, all the amazing authors. Many of them are dear friends and colleagues of mine. We've known each other most of our lifetimes, even before we had books. Bruce Lipton and I just celebrated 30 years of friendship before either one of us had our books out there. And I want to thank you for supporting him and for everything you're doing to be the best version of yourself, and by doing that, to create the best world possible. This is what pure human awakening is all about. And with that, that's what I wanted to say to you today. I'm going to close our program. I'm going to invite you to enjoy that book. I hope you enjoy reading it as much as I enjoyed putting it together for you. I'm going to say I love you all for a bunch of reasons. I love you for being on this planet right now, for staying with it, for not giving up, for the love that you bring this world. We need every single one of you. Thank you for all you do to be the best version of yourself. I love you. Mwah.